with two other couples in the woods of Montana. A couple of weeks earlier, our friends Mark and Wendy had suggested this getaway. While enjoying a BBQ at their place, Mark showed off a new way to cook steaks, pouring Southern Comfort on the grill, creating an impressive flame. I was surprised he didn't get singed. Soon after, another couple, Jim and Kathy, joined our plans with excitement. In just a few days, we rented a cabin for our long weekend. Everyone was busy deciding what to pack. Chloe kept asking me questions like, should I take my hair curlers? Will they have power? What about a fridge? I would stare off, realizing how much of a city girl I had married. Her impatience would soon lead her to call Wendy or Kathy for their opinions. Before diving deeper, let me introduce myself. I'm Jason, but most people call me Jace or just Jay. The nickname tells you how long I've known someone. If they call me Jay, they are part of my close circle. My wife Chloe and I have been happily married for about 9 years. Chloe is 39, and I'm 42. We met at a bar years ago, and our connection was instant. We got married in a small ceremony, inviting only a few friends and family because that's how we wanted it. Since then, our lives have been centered around each other, sharing everything possible. Chloe is a nurse, and her stories from work can be quite vivid, which she enjoys. I can tell when dinner is served what interesting medical tale I might hear about. As for me, I'm a software engineer, navigating various projects but struggling to reach that big payday. I guess I'm better at engineering than negotiating. Nonetheless, we do well together, sharing interests like movies and running. Chloe looks great for her age, 5'4" and about 115 pounds. Many of her friends are envious since the only workout she does is running. She eats what she likes and never seems to gain weight. Her older sisters, who are all more robust, can't help but talk about it, convinced she must have some secret to maintaining her figure. She just smiles playfully and laughs when her friends and family get frustrated with her. I'm a big guy, about 6 feet tall and weighing around 210 pounds. I'm not overweight, but I'm not obsessed with the gym either. I guess you could say I'm solid. I shave my head because my hair is thinning, and it saves me time instead of dealing with hair products like some guys do. Other than that, I keep a tidy appearance, but I skip things like pedicures. I just find it a bit odd to sit while someone else works on my nails. It's not for me. We don't have kids. We tried a few times and spent a lot on treatments, but after the last effort didn't work out, we decided to stop trying. The cost and the stress weren't worth it. We accepted the situation and chose to enjoy our freedom, doing things like heading to the woods whenever we wanted. So here we were, at a cozy lodge deep in the forest that Wendy found. We arrived late on Friday and shared a lot of laughter as we carried our stuff into the lodge. Wendy and Mark got there first and claimed the master bedroom. We came next and took the first guest room. Jim and Kathy arrived last and joked all evening about how we took the best rooms, threatening to stage a midnight takeover. I also noticed the large selection of drinks that Jim brought. He's a quiet millionaire who enjoys the finer things in life and isn't shy about spending on what he values. However, he still drives a 10-year-old Ford Explorer. Looking through his collection, I saw 3 types of tequila, which would make Chloe happy since that's her favorite, along with various bourbons, whiskeys, and a few vodkas, plus a bunch of mixers. I stood there happily knowing I brought some beer with me since I prefer it over hard liquor. Beer just seems to last longer for me. Chloe doesn't like me getting involved when we check into a hotel or anywhere else. She has her own way of doing things. While everyone else rushed around, I wandered around the house we rented, sipping my beer and watching the chaos. I saw Mark bringing a bag of what looked like party hats upstairs. Mark works for a local cable company and isn't fond of his job, but he's okay with that, as his life is outside of work. He never brought work home and enjoyed his life during the hours he wasn't in the office. At 43, he was a year older than me. To be honest, he was better looking and in slightly better shape. That didn't stop me from beating him in racquetball most weeks. He said I just wanted it more. Still, he had strong features, striking blue eyes, and usually stayed clean-shaven. But this weekend, he had a few days stubble, and his hair looked great, almost like a politician's. At 5'10" and 190 pounds, he looked the part. Mark really wanted to be a psychologist, but didn't want to spend many years and a lot of money pursuing that dream. So he spent his time analyzing us. We often laughed at his amateur assessments, even if sometimes they hit a little too close to home. His wife, Wendy, came out of the bedroom and noticed me, giving me a bright smile. She was once the prom queen, the head cheerleader, admired by many. Unlike most girls in that role, she was very smart. With blonde curls to her shoulders and a charming presence, she had a great sense of humor and strong opinions. While she leaned to the right politically, we enjoyed her company. She didn't use her beauty to get ahead, even though it often worked out that way for her. I'd seen her charm her way out of speeding tickets just with a smile, which made me a bit envious because my smile often got me in trouble. She worked out regularly, and at 5'7", she looked as good as she did in high school, fit and graceful. We all noticed her figure, but it was clear she remained devoted to Mark, and they shared a love similar to that of Chloe and me, or Jim and Kathy. Speaking of Jim and Kathy, they entered, carrying a large chest between them, with Kathy playfully looking at Jim. "What's in this thing, weights?" she joked, panting a little. "Don't worry, you'll appreciate it later," he answered. Kathy put her end down, stretched her back, then looked over at me with narrowing eyes. "What are you doing?" "Get over here and help out," she said teasingly. I smiled, set my beer down, and moved to grab the other end of the chest. It wasn't too heavy, she was just joking. "Yes, ma'am," I said, pretending to tip an imaginary hat. "Where would you like this?" I asked. "The bedroom will do, doorman, and hurry," she replied, dramatically heading back to the car, all in good fun. "And don't you be staring," she called back to me, aware I was watching her walk away. "That's not for you, just so you know. I'll tell my husband." I glanced at Jim, and he looked at me with a shrug. "Can't live with them, can't get rid of them," he said as we headed up the stairs. I looked back at Jim and thought about our friendship. I had known both Jim and Mark since college. We attended the same high school, but we were in different groups. I was the quiet one, Jim was the athletic one, and Mark was the hard worker. He had a job throughout high school while the rest of us were often out having fun, or in my case, at home on the computer. We were good friends and had shared many moments together. Even though we were very different people wanting different things, we found common ground and really enjoyed each other's company. It was funny how much like the Three Musketeers we seemed to be. Mark would come up with ideas, Jim would fund them, and I would be the one thinking things through and keeping us in check. When Jim wanted to hire some people to confront a group protesting at a local funeral, I convinced him it wasn't a good idea. Instead, Mark suggested we ask some local bikers for help. As it turned out, when we spoke to the bikers, they refused to take any money for it. Later, Jim arranged to deliver bike parts to them anyway. He always looked out for people like that. Jim was short, standing at 5'5", but he was strong. He had blonde, curly hair and often looked like a surfer, even though he wore a suit during the week. He had made a few million through a window cleaning business. I had helped him with the computer work, and after a few years, he had eliminated the local competition. Eventually, he sold the entire business to an office cleaning company and settled down. But he still kept an office and seemed to invest in small local businesses. I wasn't sure exactly what he did, but I knew he had helped many people around here. Every now and then I would grab a coffee, and the servers, knowing I knew him, would rave about how great he was. Even though Jim had good luck in business, he truly hit the jackpot with his wife, Kathy. She was fantastic. I had actually dated her in high school, but it quickly became clear that I couldn't give her what she wanted. She had big goals and dreams, and she aimed high, having come from a working-class background. After a few dates, she made it clear that unless I left my comfort zone and engaged more with the world, we wouldn't have a future. I didn't want to compare Bill Gates and Michael Jordan for her. It wouldn't have gone well. She was nice, so I just let it be. Actually, I had reintroduced her to Jim 10 years ago. They got married after 2 years and have been doing well since. Kathy was another hard worker. She was petite like my Chloe, but a bit more toned and sun-kissed. She tanned regularly. She had a slim figure and preferred not to wear a bra most of the time. Though small, she wasn't too small. More than once, we noticed some slips under her tank top, making her blush. Her dark, curly hair flowed down her back, and no one dared to ask if she colored it. Jim and Kathy had 2 toddlers and a nanny at home, which Wendy liked. Chloe and I found it surprising, but it was their choice and their money, and maybe we were a little jealous too. So here we were, at this nicely decorated but remote lodge for a long weekend. Jim brought fishing gear, Mark brought his bow, and I brought a laptop with extra batteries. I wasn't foolish. I knew they would want to watch movies when they got tired of the outdoors. Once we were settled, it was time to plan in the kitchen. All right, Jim said, speaking over the chatter around us, taking charge. The long weekend starts now, and to kick things off, we're having a shot of tequila. Grab one. He pointed to several pre-poured glasses. Everyone took one except me. I glanced at my watch. It was 11:15 a.m. Isn't it a bit early? I asked playfully. Jim lowered his glass and looked at me a bit frustrated. You driving, are you? He asked. No, of course not. Fine, I replied, taking a glass. Chloe nudged me closer and said, Come on, let's enjoy the weekend and relax. She liked to make me laugh with British phrases, knowing about my family's heritage. Mark then said quietly, I think someone should remember our college days. Get back into that mood. Without turning, I replied, and some people should remember who could drink more. That was another small mistake I made, leading to the trouble later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. During college, I could handle a lot of alcohol. But something changed about 4 years ago. I just couldn't drink as much anymore. Too much would make me sleepy now, unlike when I was younger. I didn't mind much. I had my fun times in college, enjoyed them, and then moved on. Sometimes I felt a little awkward around people in their 40s who seemed to want to relive those days. But a little drink now and then wouldn't hurt, right? We took a shot, cheered, then did another. It was a quick way to get a buzz on a Saturday afternoon. Luckily, we calmed down after a while. What's the plan now? Kathy asked. What are we doing? Jim answered, I thought about going fishing. There's a creek about a mile away that's good for fly fishing. Wendy rolled her eyes. I know someone who's going to be really bored. Kathy, if you want to stay here where it smells better, feel free. Kathy looked at Jim and said, Yes, I think I might need to. For my peace of mind. Jim looked away and said, Okay. Mark turned to me. What about you, Jay? Well, I was planning to sit outside and do some writing, I said. It was no secret I was working on a novel, and I thought that some quiet time outside would help me focus. Chloe pretended to be sick, putting her finger in her mouth, then turned to me with a big smile. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Can we all sit around you and admire your work? Sometimes Chloe's jokes could be a bit much. Sure, but I think you'd rather everyone admire you, right? I replied, trying to keep the playful mood. We were all joking around. None of us cared too much about what the others chose to do. The teasing felt genuine and relaxed. Chloe made a funny face at me and then asked Wendy, Did you bring that new shawl? I want to see it. Oh, the one from Gideon's? Kathy chimed in. Yes, come show us, Wendy said, and the girls walked off toward the bedrooms. I turned to Jim and Mark. Forget the tequila. I'll go for a beer. Mark smiled. Sure. When he took one from the fridge and tossed it to me, I asked, What are you going to do? Oh, I'm just seeing what fun I can stir up with our ladies, he said casually. Mark liked to say bold things to get a reaction from everyone. He claimed it was for fun, but sometimes I thought he just liked to stir the pot. Good luck with that, Jim said, going to get his fishing gear. Yeah, I said to Mark, making a point for Jim's sake. Let me know what shade Kathy is wearing. Jim walked out, giving me a playful gesture. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing what I planned, sitting outside in a chair I had brought from the kitchen. I worked until my laptop battery died. I had written almost 3,000 words, which I thought was pretty good. The story and characters in my book weren't going to win any awards, but I was more interested in seeing if I could finish a book than thinking I was writing a masterpiece. When my battery stopped working, I went back inside and decided I had done enough for the day. I had 2 fully charged batteries left, which would be fine for tomorrow. As I entered the house, I could hear lively chatter. I found the girls in the kitchen talking and eating crackers while sipping on wine. They had clearly been enjoying themselves for a while since they seemed very cheerful. I noticed they had all changed into sundresses, and it was clear they weren't wearing bras. It was quite a sight. Jim still wasn't back, but Mark was at the kitchen table, looking through some papers. Here he is, girls, my own Mark Twain. Chloe laughed when she saw me. Yeah, I said, leaning in for a kiss. Chloe put down her glass, took my face in her hands, and gave me a kiss while the other girls playfully cheered. Mark looked up from his paperwork and said, Get a room, you two. I grinned and replied, I wouldn't mind. I'll use yours. After breaking away from Chloe, I asked, So what's on the schedule for tonight? Wendy chuckled. Oh, I think you'll like this. Kathy jumped in. Did you bring your projector for your laptop? Before I could answer, Chloe said, Of course he did. My little nerd is always ready for a show, aren't you, sweetie? Yes, I have it, I said, ignoring Chloe's teasing. Why do you ask? We were thinking about having a BBQ outside, maybe a fire pit and watching a movie. The only wall we can use for the projection is outside. What do you think? I nodded. That sounds kind of cool, but there's one problem. I didn't bring any movies. Mark stood up. I've got that covered, my friend. He reached into his backpack and pulled out about 4 DVDs. Are you serious? I laughed. Really? These titles? Who comes up with these names? Mark raised his eyebrows at me. Wendy chose them. I looked at Wendy. She nearly choked on her drink. I did not, she said, sounding defensive. I would never pick something like that. We need more movies aimed at women, don't we, girls? I laughed. I can agree with that. So, Mark, I asked playfully, what do those movies look like? He smiled at me and said, I don't know. She wasn't wearing any. Kathy turned bright red and tossed some chips at him, making it clear that she understood what I was asking. I laughed and changed the subject, asking, So, what's for dinner? 3 hours later, the sun had set, and we had enjoyed a good meal on the grill. Mark really knows how to cook a great steak, and we even had some fish that Jim brought back. He had caught 3 small trout himself and had a blast cleaning them, while the women made faces and said, Ew and gross. After that, he had to go clean up, and I was given the job of burying the remains because of the smell. We moved the couch, a chair, and a couple of bean bags outside, set up an old fire pit, and got a fire going. We quickly moved the chairs back because we underestimated how hot a fire pit can be. As the sun went down, we sat in our chairs, enjoying drinks, chatting and joking around about our hopes for the future and other fun topics. When it got dark, the light from the fire created a cozy atmosphere. At one point, Jim, sitting on the couch with Kathy on his lap, set his drink down and said, Now it's movie time. Did anyone bring popcorn? I looked at him and replied, Are you sure about this? I mean, really, a movie like that? There's hardly any story. Oh, come on, Mark said. It's just for laughs. We can talk about the dialogues and the fashion. Yeah, Mr. Serious, join in the fun, Wendy added. Is he like this all the time? Kathy asked Chloe, who was squeezed into the armchair next to me. You really need to get out more. I could introduce you to some nice guys, she said, emphasizing her point with playful movements. Chloe laughed lightly and said, Oh no, he's quite adventurous at home. You should see him in my clothes. I cleared my throat and played along. To be fair, I was out of fresh clothes, and honestly, the lace looked good. Okay, let me grab the laptop. I stood up quickly, almost bumping into Chloe, who huffed but saved her drink. I went inside and returned with the laptop, taking a few moments to set it up. It was perfectly positioned against the wall, and the picture was clear and bright. All right, who has the movie for tonight? I asked, and a DVD flew through the air, hitting the back of my head. Thanks for the great throw, I said with a grin. I inserted the disc into the laptop, turned up the volume, and settled back down. The movie started, and since it was playing on a laptop without a remote, we had to watch it all the way through without skipping any parts. The film turned out to be about a group of friends who were very involved in their church activities and held their own gatherings afterward. In a quiet room, a small group sat together, discussing different passages from a text. Each verse was examined, often in a light-hearted way, and they debated what meaning it might hold. At first there was laughter and joking, but over time the room grew quiet, and a feeling of reflection took over. Chloe sat beside me, leaning close to share a quiet observation. Her words were light-hearted, breaking the silence in a playful way that made me smile. She seemed to enjoy the peaceful moment, and we exchanged a few quiet laughs, both aware of the stillness around us. Nearby, our friends sat close, each absorbed in their own thoughts. A few shared knowing glances, smiles, and nods, enjoying the warmth of the fire that lit up the room. It was a rare moment for us all to share something meaningful together, breaking away from the usual noise of everyday life. I glanced around, noticing how different this gathering felt. There was a sense of closeness and trust, and though we were all different, in that moment we seemed connected. Chloe looked at me with a smile, and I nodded back, grateful for the quiet comfort of shared company. In that peaceful moment, our group sat together, each lost in our own thoughts, yet brought together by a simple evening spent among friends. The room grew quiet as the movie ended, and the projector cast only a blank screen onto the wall. The only sounds left were the crackling of the fire and the soft breathing of everyone gathered around. Chloe, who had been sitting close to me, looked up when I touched her arm gently. I whispered, "Let's go inside. I think we could both use a break." She nodded, and we carefully slipped away, not wanting to disturb the quiet atmosphere of the group by the fire. Once we got inside, we shared a moment, simply enjoying each other's company away from everyone else. We laughed a little, savoring the warmth and closeness, and then quietly made our way up the stairs to one of the rooms. The narrow staircase made it tricky to get up without bumping into things, and we laughed a bit more as we navigated our way to the top. When we finally reached the room, we both flopped onto the bed, feeling relaxed and content, grateful to have this moment away from the gathering. We spent a quiet while together, talking softly, sharing stories, and enjoying each other's presence in a calm and gentle way. It was a peaceful break, allowing us to reconnect and enjoy the simple comfort of friendship. As we lay together, Chloe leaned in close and smiled at me, her expression relaxed and content. We'd shared many quiet moments like this over the years, and I could see how at peace she was. Chloe didn't often experience those deeply intense moments, but that never bothered her. She enjoyed the connection and the closeness we shared. We both valued what we could do for each other, and that had always been enough. Just as we settled in, still catching our breath, she looked over her shoulder with a soft smile, and I felt grateful for this simple, quiet time together. After a few minutes, I asked, "Want some water?" intending to head to the kitchen. She nodded, but then quickly added, "Actually, let's just stay here for a bit longer," snuggling closer. I put my arms around her, feeling the comfort of her presence, and we stayed that way, enjoying the calm. In a light-hearted tone, I joked, "Well, maybe this is a good excuse to spend more evenings like this." She just smiled, resting back against me. A few moments later, I slipped away to grab some water. On my way back, I noticed a few quiet sounds from the other rooms. Our friends seemed to be enjoying their own peaceful moments, too. Returning to our room, I handed Chloe her glass of water, and she looked up at me, relaxed and content. I gestured quietly toward the wall, hinting at the soft sounds coming from the other rooms, and we both laughed, happy to share this gentle, light-hearted evening with friends nearby. She listened carefully, and all of a sudden her eyes widened as she realized what she was hearing. "Yeah," I said. "They are a little behind us, but that's usual." I laughed. We sat there, sipping our water for a few minutes. I looked at my wife and took in how beautiful she was. She was getting even better with age, and I just knew we would be together forever. It's amazing how love can make you feel that way. She caught me staring and playfully nudged me with her foot. Her touch made me smile, and she sat up looking at me with curiosity. "Is my little buddy ready for more?" she asked with a teasing grin. "Who are you calling little?" I said, setting down my water and leaning closer to her. "Be gentle this time," Chloe said, "or I might be sore in the morning." "Your wish is my command," I said, giving her a soft kiss on the foot. We connected slowly the second time, gazing at each other all the while. She didn't reach her peak that time, but I think it felt even more special because of the slowness and care we showed. I felt that way too. I would have taken even more time if I had known it would be our last moment like that. Eventually, I felt a wave of warmth, and we were so tired that we just fell asleep, still holding hands. I jolted awake to someone knocking on the door. There was a sound in the background that I couldn't quite recognize as I tried to fully wake up. "Jay, you there? We need you out here, man." It was Jim, knocking insistently. Chloe stirred beside me and sat up, looking a bit confused. "What's going on?" she asked, brushing her hair away from her face. "I don't know," I replied, getting out of bed and finding some shorts. "Let me check." I went to the door, making sure that Chloe was covered with blankets, and opened it. Jim stood on the landing in his robe. "Hear that?" he asked, and now that he mentioned it, I could hear the sound in the background wind and rain. "We've got a big storm coming, that's why it was so nice today and warm tonight. A high-pressure front was on its way in. Anyway, we can't stand here chatting. We need to bring in those chairs so they don't get soaked. Mark is already outside and grabbed your laptop and projector. Looks like they're okay. I made a mental note to ask what okay meant. Later, Jim is great, but he struggles with technology. Chloe joined me at the door, wrapping herself in a cozy cardigan. We need to get those chairs in, she said. We do, Jim agreed, and I noticed him glance at Chloe's outfit. He headed downstairs and we followed him. As we passed the kitchen table, I spotted my laptop. I quickly checked it out. There was a little dampness on top, but it was mostly fine. I felt relieved. That laptop meant a lot to me. This was a reminder to make sure we saved our files more often. I rushed outside and saw everyone bringing things in. The rain had started, and everyone was wet. Kathy and Wendy were dragging in the chair that Chloe and I had used earlier, and it seemed they were not dressed for the weather either. Jim and I carried in the large sofa while Chloe picked up the beanbag. Mark was at the grill, grabbing the cooking supplies and securing the cover. We all got inside fairly quickly, but we were all soaked. Once we were inside, we collapsed on the furniture and just looked at one another. The girls were soaked, and since they were in their cozy clothes, they seemed quite exposed. The guys looked a bit messy from the rain. I managed to stay somewhat dry since I had no hair and was only wearing shorts. But then I realized that my white shorts in the rain probably wasn't the best idea, as they were quite see-through. Wendy nudged Kathy and nodded toward me, and both stared for a moment. I shifted awkwardly and tried to lighten the mood. To celebrate the moment, I think we should give each other funny Indian names. From now on, Wendy, you will be called Cheerleader Hobo. Wendy laughed, and soon we all followed, glad to break the tension. In that case, Chloe, please don't take this the wrong way, but with that outfit, you are now bedraggled friend. Chloe burst out laughing and coughing. All right then, Kathy, that makes you wet curly rat, she joked, referring to Kathy's messy hair. Kathy looked over at Mark and said softly, Oh, you have no idea. We paused for a moment, unsure how to respond. Luckily, the boys' names didn't create any awkward moments, and after a few minutes, we decided to head back to bed. I was really tired, and I was sure Chloe was as well. From what I could tell, it had been quite a night for everyone. We all fell asleep within minutes of getting into bed again, despite the noise of the wind outside. Or maybe we didn't. I couldn't tell about anyone else, but I was out like a light. The next morning, I woke up with a yawn and smelled coffee drifting in through the open door, where my wife must have gone. I stretched, got out of bed, put on some comfortable sweats and a t-shirt no more wet pants for me, and went to find her. When I got downstairs, everyone was sitting around with cups of coffee. They had used the gas stove, which was a huge help. As I walked in, Mark came through the door. Morning, my friend. Have you had your coffee yet? He asked. I rubbed my head and said, No, not yet. I joked with the girls at the table, saying, Just getting some, hint, hint. Wendy replied, You can get it yourself. Your wife needs to take a break after last night. And she smiled. What have you told them, Chloe? I asked as I poured myself some coffee. Chloe looked at me with a shy smile. I think the noise spoke for itself, Jay, she answered, sipping her coffee. Ah, yes, the noise. I can't help it. I guess I'm just that type of guy, I said lightly, enjoying my first sip of coffee. Right. He kept getting my hair all tangled, ladies. That's what you heard me asking him to let go. Such a clumsy oaf. You don't believe any of it, Chloe said, unable to stop smiling. Wendy and Kathy exchanged a knowing look, and Chloe caught it. What? She asked. Yeah, we heard you last night, Chloe, they replied with teasing smiles. Chloe blushed, and Jim suddenly spoke up. Oh, that big display? Yeah, we know. He liked to show off in college any chance he could. It's like that's his way of standing out since he doesn't have much else going for him. A big show isn't everything, though. I wouldn't know because mine is pretty impressive, he added with a laugh. Kathy chuckled and agreed. No argument there. This whole discussion felt too personal. My wife was at the table, chatting about me with my friends, and I wanted to escape. Mark then interjected, Okay, joking aside, we have a real issue. The storm last night, I checked for damage. We signed a release, so any damage is on us. The building looks fine, but some trees are definitely down. One is blocking the road, and we need to handle it. We all thought about that as we sipped our coffee. Wendy asked, What can we use? We can't just move a tree. Is there someone we can call? Mark waved his hand in frustration. Can anyone get service out here? I can't, and neither can Jim. We do have some tools. I found a handsaw and an axe in the shed. But whoever deals with this will be going old school. We sat in silence for a moment. I think we should draw lots, someone suggested. Another pause followed. Fine, I said. I know how this will go, but okay, let's do it. It has to be done. Mark tore some strips from his papers, shuffled the three of them behind his back, and held them out to me. As luck would have it, I ended up picking the shortest one. Great, I muttered softly, not surprised. This sort of thing always happens to me. A tough task? Guess who will be doing it? I shrugged. All right, then. Okay, I might as well check things out and see what needs to be done. I got up, went upstairs, and changed into shorts and a t-shirt. Chloe came up behind me while I was getting ready. Don't take too long, she said with a smile. I'll bring you lunch. I turned around, gave her a quick kiss, ruffled her hair, and said, Your tough lumberjack will be back before you know it. She stepped back and laughed. Just don't wear anything silly or pick up anyone at bars, all right? I chuckled too, put on my t-shirt, and headed downstairs. Mark pointed me to the tools, and I got started. The tree blocking the road was about 1/4 mile from the house. It was just far enough that going back would be a hassle. I looked around for a spot in case I needed a break and smiled at the thought. Time to enjoy nature. I had my phone and Bluetooth speakers, so I set them up and started to plan the work ahead of me. The tree was a mess. It was an old oak, probably over 100 years old. It had been pulled slightly from its roots, but the real issue was the branch that had broken off and fallen onto the road. The tree was leaning, but not too much to let a car get by. I didn't need to cut the whole tree down, just remove the branch that was hanging over the road. The problem was that the break where the branch had come off was too high for me to reach. I could cut the part on the road, but I couldn't get high enough to clear the path completely. I realized I had no choice but to bring the whole tree down and hope it fell the right way. I didn't have experience with this, but how hard could it be? Well, I found out. It was tough. Oak trees are solid. The axe wasn't very sharp, and I was already tired from the night before. I spent all morning chopping and was really sore in my shoulders. Chloe came to check on me around 1 p.m. and brought water, soda, beer, and a couple of sandwiches. They were a welcome surprise, and she took a moment to massage my shoulders, which felt amazing. I wasn't sure if she had been drinking a lot, but I could tell she was a bit lighthearted. There were signs of it in the way she spoke about things she normally wouldn't. Later, I learned that I was wrong about the drinks. She had only had a little. It was the other substance they were using that had affected her. I also found out that Mark had made all the portions small, and since I was the first to be offered, I got the smallest one. He had even winked at Jim while doing it, all because he knew how I felt about marijuana and wanted a clear day to relax with everyone. To be clear, I don't mind if others want to use it. That's their choice. Just don't do it around me. It bothers me, and I have some bad memories from my childhood related to it. Out of respect for me, Chloe doesn't use it around me either. She grew up in a different environment and didn't see the problem with it. I knew she occasionally indulged when not with me, and I was fine with that. Just don't bring it home or use it in my presence. I'm not sure why I feel so strongly about it. Maybe it's because while the effects are similar to drinking, I just can't stand it. Thankfully, everyone respected my wishes. They managed it by making sure I wasn't around when they wanted to enjoy it. And looking back, I see that. Chloe stayed for a while to watch me work. Then she mentioned something mysterious like, if you thought last night was great, wait till tonight, and walked away. I was still feeling the effects of the previous day, not thinking clearly enough to worry about her hint. But I had a job to finish, and I focused on that. It took me another hour to bring the tree down. Although it fell the right way, a branch still lay across the road. I needed 2 more hours to cut off that limb, then another 2 hours to remove it and clean up. By 5 p.m., I was exhausted, sweaty, and in desperate need of a shower. But the task was complete. My phone had died while playing music, but that was fine since there was no reception here anyway. I picked up the axe and hummed a tune on my way home. Arriving back, the party was lively. Music filled the air. The fire was crackling again. Mark had cleaned out the wet ash from the last night and restocked it with dry wood. Drinks were spread all over, and Mark had set up a bar on a side table. Wendy and Kathy were dancing. What caught my eye were the outfits the girls were wearing. Kathy was in a striking red dress, designed in a way that revealed quite a bit. I had no idea she owned such a dress, let alone would wear it. Wendy was in a white halter dress that flowed gracefully, but was cut quite low. If she leaned too far, it seemed like it could slip. It was hard not to stare at her. She looked incredible in that dress. Then I noticed Chloe, and I stopped in my tracks. She was wearing a combination of a jacket and a dress. She wore a black pleated skirt that went above her knee. When she turned to greet me, I noticed her jacket was a bit snug with one button fastened, revealing some of her figure beneath. "Our warrior returns," Wendy called out when she saw me. I paused for a moment, taking in the scene. Mark was at the grill, Jim chatted with Chloe, while Wendy and Kathy danced near the drinks table. The guys wore nice pants and collared shirts, looking put together. The girls were dressed in their own unique styles, which surprised me. And there I was, feeling hot, sweaty, and a bit out of place. Chloe smiled brightly and approached me, placing her hand on my arm. "There you are. So glad to see you. We were waiting for you." I noticed she seemed a little tipsy, but that was part of the fun, right? So many thoughts filled my mind, but I knew things would unfold as they would. "You like?" she asked, twirling around in her skirt. I nodded. She knew I liked pleated skirts. I looked at her, curious. "Jim brought a bunch of dress-up clothes in the chest," she explained. I stood there, processing this. Questions buzzed in my mind, like how Jim knew her size and why he would bring those clothes. But I didn't want to ask them right then. Something was up, though I couldn't put my finger on it. Still, she looked amazing, and I was eager to spend time with her later, just like the night before. "I need to clean up. I feel gross," I said. "Just the smell of a hard day's work," Chloe replied, wrinkling her nose a bit. "But if you could do that somewhere else, that would be nice. Go shower." She leaned in and whispered, "I have a surprise for you later." Her words hung in the air, leaving me curious. Jim approached, handed me a beer, and said, "Get cleaned up, boy. We have games tonight." So I headed upstairs and decided to take a bath. I could have showered, but I was sore from the day's work and had promised myself a soak. It might take longer, but the people downstairs would still be there. Before I slipped into the warm water, I tried to shave my head with my razor, but found it difficult because the blade was dull. That was odd since it was nearly new. I was just tired and had other things on my mind, mostly about Chloe and the evening ahead. Because of this, I completely missed the small hairs at the bottom of the tub when I took a bath. I noticed them and wondered what they were, but I just swished them down the drain. Sitting in the hot bath and drinking a beer wasn't the best idea. When I got out, I felt better, but the combination of hot water and beer made me even more tired. I felt I had to join in on whatever was happening. I went into the bedroom and found some chinos and a collared shirt laid out for me. These weren't my clothes, but no one seemed to be wearing their own clothes that evening either, so I thought, why not? I put them on and they fit perfectly. When I went downstairs, the tiredness hit me again. Everyone cheered when I walked in, and there were whiskey toasts right away. Jim handed me a drink, and I said, "I'm not sure about this." He just waved me off, saying, "That's a special bottle. Drink up and enjoy." I glanced at Chloe, and she raised her glass to me along with everyone else. So I went along with it and took a sip. Soon we moved inside, bringing the bar with us. Over the next hour, I had about 3 shots and 2 beers, and with each drink, I felt more tired. We played charades, which had a lot of playful actions, but I didn't understand most of them. It wasn't that I was shy, I was just so worn out and kept dozing off. Eventually, Chloe sat next to me on the couch, looking a bit worried. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm just really tired. I'm not sure how much longer I can stay awake. Last night being woken up, the drinks last night, work today, the drinks now, She looked into my eyes and said, "Well, here's something to help you stay awake." She glanced around, and while everyone else was busy, she took my hand and led me to a quieter spot. I was surprised by her boldness. She seemed different tonight, more lively than usual. I couldn't help but smile at her, feeling a mix of surprise and confusion. She smiled back, took a sip of her drink, and placed a finger to her lips, saying, "Later." Then she got up, and that's about all I remember from the rest of the night. I think I stayed on the couch for a bit longer. I was offered another beer, which I might have accepted, but pretty soon I fell asleep right there, completely out. At some point, I vaguely remember someone shaking me and calling my name, but I can't say if that really happened or not. I guess it must have. The events of the previous night, along with hard work during the day and too much drinking, caught up with me, and I simply passed out. Later that night, I woke up feeling very thirsty with a dry mouth. I had started on the couch, but someone had kindly covered me with a blanket, which was comforting. I could hear quiet sounds nearby that caught my attention, and when I turned my head, what I saw shocked me deeply and stayed with me forever. My wife, the person I loved most in the world, was in an unexpected position near the coffee table. Her skirt was hiked up, and she was in a state of intimacy with Jim, one of my close friends. He had a hand on her back, and she was holding onto the table. While their eyes were closed, I could tell she was caught up in the moment, showing a side of her I rarely saw. She murmured words of desire that mirrored what she had said to me the night before. Those words sent a chill through me. I sat there, wide-eyed, hoping someone would notice me, but they were completely lost in the moment. I knew firsthand that when Chloe was in this state, it would take something huge to get her attention. I looked at Jim, and he was just as focused and unaware. My heart felt like it was breaking as I watched. My wife seemed very engaged, and she was with one of my best friends. I wondered where Mark and the others were, and then realized I needed to decide what to do. At that moment, I was not feeling anger. I was in shock and heartbroken without a clue on how to respond. Eventually, I thought, I can't stay here. I need to leave. My instinct to escape kicked in, and leaving seemed like the only option. Thinking back, if I had chosen to confront them, it wouldn't have ended well for anyone. I have training in martial arts, but I hadn't practiced in years. Still, I remembered enough to know it was best to avoid conflict. Slowly, I got up, letting the blanket slip off, and carefully moved away from the couple. I thought to myself that I needed to get out and realized I had to find my car keys. They were on the bedside table in our room. As I walked to our room, I decided I could use a drink of water too. I knew I shouldn't be driving since I still felt the effects of the alcohol, but staying didn't feel right, so I had to take that risk. As I headed to our room, I passed by Mark and Wendy's room and discovered where Kathy was. I noticed the door was open as I walked by, and I couldn't help but peek inside. Wendy was lying on the bed, leaning back on the pillows. She was not dressed, and I could see she was using one hand to hold on to herself, while the other was on Kathy's head. Kathy was on her knees, focused on Wendy. Mark was behind Kathy, pushing her forward. I could see sweat on his back. Kathy appeared to be really involved, getting close to Wendy. I paused for a moment, but realized how upset I was at that moment. I wasn't even attracted to what I was seeing. I thought about it later, and while it seemed intriguing, it just didn't interest me for clear reasons. I quickly moved along before Wendy noticed me. I went into our room, grabbed my keys and my backpack. Thankfully, I had put my laptop and projector in it earlier to keep them safe. Then I went downstairs quietly. I picked up my dead phone and slipped out the front door. Jim and Chloe were in the middle of their own moment, and now Chloe was on top. I saw that she was also not dressed, and Jim seemed to be enjoying it. Luckily, the stairs were close to the front door, making it easy to leave without being seen. They were so focused on each other that I wasn't likely to draw attention. If the door had slammed, it might have created an awkward situation. I could sense that things could get out of hand. Once outside, I walked to my car and got in. I took a moment to breathe and try to figure out my feelings. I needed to think clearly about what to do next, but my mind was racing with different thoughts. I need to get home. I was glad I had my Mustang GT, the car I've always wanted. It would get me home quickly, especially since I drive fast. I wondered why she would do this after we had such a nice time last night. They would notice I was gone soon, and with no phone signal here, they would have to come after me. I thought about whether she had done this before, but I dismissed that idea. I would have known, right? My phone was dead, and while I had a charger, I didn't want to use it. If by chance they got a signal, I didn't feel like talking to her. Did the others plan this? I wondered if they often did things like this, and if we were just newcomers. If I didn't respond, Chloe would definitely come looking for me. I could make it home in about an hour and a half in my Mustang, but I figured it would take them longer in their vehicle. I wonder how she will feel about this in the morning. What about me? Time to stop thinking and start acting. I started the car, shifted into gear, and carefully let the clutch out. I quietly left the small parking lot, turned on the lights, and drove down the long, winding road to the lodge. I passed the tree I had cut down that day and finally reached the main road. We lived in Spokane, Washington, so I had a long drive ahead of me, but that was fine. Driving was just what I needed to clear my mind. I headed home and let the car move along. When I arrived home after an hour and 33 minutes, I quickly got out of the car and rushed into the house we shared. Inside, I found several messages waiting on the phone. I didn't want to listen to them, so I spent a frantic 30 minutes gathering everything I thought I would need that would fit in my Mustang. I packed some monitors, keyboards, a couple of computers, hard drives, as many clothes as I could find, toiletries, and even items like a plate, a bowl, utensils, and a cup. I grabbed some of my favorite books, even though I usually read on my Kindle. The physical books reminded me of good memories. I also took the framed painting my dad made of my mom when they first met. I had other things I wanted to take, but I knew she would be coming to the house soon, assuming she still had any feelings for me. I didn't know what she was thinking. I just wanted to leave. As I packed my last items, the home phone rang and the machine picked it up. It was Chloe. She sounded upset and said, "Are you there? I can't reach you on your cell. Where are you? I'm really worried. Please call me. We need to talk. Jay, where are you?" Hearing her voice broke my heart again. I thought of how I had woken up to see my wife with my best friend right in front of me. It felt so disrespectful. I nearly laughed at the thought of how they hadn't even bothered to go upstairs. But then I realized how messed up I felt. I had to leave. I drove to the other side of town and checked into a cheap motel. I hid my car behind some garbage bins where no one could see it unless they were parked in a certain spot, and I just stayed there. I sat there for 3 days. I didn't work or eat much. I simply stayed quiet, lost in thought, about the future and my plans. Whenever I thought about Chloe and what was ahead, all I could picture was her with Jim. I remembered things she had said to both of us, and it made me feel confused. I struggled to accept that she might be different now. This made me wonder if I should find out more about it, and if knowing would really change anything. One thing was clear. I could no longer stay with her. I couldn't look at her the same way I did the night before. My image of Chloe had changed, and now I saw her in a way that hurt me deeply. It felt like the person I loved was gone, replaced by someone who could share moments with my friends. It was tearing me apart. Eventually, I left the motel and drove to Portland. I charged up my phone and saw I had nearly 40 messages, mostly from Chloe, but some from others. I deleted them all without reading any. Once in Portland, I rented a small one-bedroom apartment. I decided it was time to return to get my things and move on. I rented a van, arranged the seats, took a deep breath, and drove back. I timed it for when I knew Chloe would be at work, and I was mostly right about it. I entered the house without issues. My keys still worked, which relieved me. I gathered the items that mattered to me, my work chair and some special collections. Everything still looked the same, but it seemed like there had been little to no cleaning during my time away. However, luck was not on my side that day. As I carried the last item to the van, Chloe pulled up in her red car. She jumped out, ran to me, and threw herself into my arms, bursting into tears. "Where have you been? I was so worried. The police were looking for you," she cried, burying her face in my neck. I gently moved her arms away and stepped back. I wasn't harsh, but I didn't feel very affectionate. Anger was building inside me, something I hadn't felt until now. I began to say something, but stopped and turned back inside. She hesitated for a moment, knowing something was wrong, then followed me in. I sat down in my favorite chair while she sank onto the sofa across from me, her bag slipping onto the floor. "I don't know what happened. Where did you go? Why did you leave?" she asked. I just sat there in silence, looking at her. I wasn't sure I could say what I was feeling at that moment. I could see she didn't want me to know what had really happened. She looked at me, unsure, as though waiting for me to say something. But I kept quiet, and she finally spoke up to fill the silence. I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what it looked like," she began, glancing at me uncertainly. I tilted my head, silently urging her to continue. "Okay, maybe it was what you saw," she admitted, her tone shifting. "But it wasn't supposed to be like that. The plan was for all of us to be together. You fell asleep." Her voice softened. as though she hoped her words would somehow explain everything. I thought about what to say next. "So, because I was asleep, that means it's fine for Jim to be with you like that?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. She sighed, looking defeated. "We thought it would be okay. You had said that we could be open with friends. I thought you'd understand. It was meant to be all of us spending time together. We had this whole evening planned, and then you just fell asleep," she repeated, as if that would make it all make sense. She went on, "When you dozed off, we made a plan. When you woke up, the three of us would be there for you. We thought you'd enjoy it too. It wasn't supposed to go this way. It was supposed to be fun, something we all shared," she said, her voice growing unsteady. I thought it through and couldn't help but question. "So let me clarify, because I fell asleep, you decided to go on without me?" I asked, feeling a surge of frustration. Chloe looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't what we planned, and it all just happened. I thought you'd be okay with it." I couldn't hide the disappointment in my voice. "So, after all of this, if I'd woken up in the middle, your idea was for me to just go along?" "That was our intention," she replied, rubbing her eyes. I took a steady breath, feeling the weight of the situation. Chloe seemed to sense the depth of my frustration and looked away. "It was a mistake," she said finally, her voice softer, more apologetic. The room grew silent as we both took a moment to process what had happened. "I think you were all a bit out of it the night before, wanting to have fun. When I fell asleep, you all came up with ideas to make it better for yourselves. That's what I believe." Chloe sat there, very still, starting to grasp how I was feeling. "I love you, Chloe, or I used to, with all my heart. Maybe I could have accepted sharing, but things changed after a long day of work." Chloe looked away when I said this, and I sensed something was off. "Oh, really, there's more to this. What is it? Chloe, your only chance here is to be completely honest." But I was already feeling angry as I listened to this. I was gripping the chair so hard that my fingers were leaving marks, but she didn't need to see that. I figured this was the only way to get the truth, or at least the part she was willing to share. Chloe sat back, bringing her legs together as she always did when she was about to admit something difficult. "Mark changed the game. He knew you wouldn't agree if you were around, so we wanted to enjoy ourselves. It was just luck about the tree, and you got caught while we had fun." "He did he? That's something to discuss with him later," I said, feeling my anger shift into a cold calm. Chloe had only seen me like this once before, and it ended badly for someone who had it coming. Though I wasn't around when it happened, she knew I was involved. "Jay, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. After the night before, you seemed so into it. I mean, we had a great time. The others even mentioned they could hear us while you were working. We talked about sharing, and everyone thought you'd be okay with it. We just needed to do it the right way. I was unsure at first, but once we started playing games after you went to sleep, it turned out fun. Chloe turned a bit red here. "I touched someone else for the first time." She even smiled a little as she said it. I took a deep breath. "Oh, that's wonderful. Another first while I was asleep. I would have liked to see that too, but I guess it doesn't matter when the old man is out cold, right? Serves him right for missing all the fun." Chloe bit her lip, twiddling her hands in her lap. "I want you to understand something, Chloe. No matter what you planned or imagined would happen, I hope you realize this. I walked into a party after working very hard all day. I was surprised to find out what was really happening. I had drinks offered to me even though I hadn't eaten anything. Eventually, I fell asleep. I regret that it happened. It was not on purpose. But while I was out, you made a choice that should have been mine. I don't know what I would have thought if I had stayed awake, but it is clear that you had no right to make that choice for me. Do you understand? You do not decide such things for someone who is asleep and unaware." Chloe looked at me, unsure of what to say, then responded, "It was just a mistake, Jay, just a mistake. I care about you and always will. You are my partner, and that won't change. I realize it was a mistake. I didn't expect you to react this way. I'm really sorry. I just don't know how to make you understand." I leaned back, thought for a moment, and tried to find the right words. "Chloe, I believe you mean it. I see that you regret it, but it still happened. You can feel sorry for as long as you want, but I woke up to find you with my best friend. That image stays with me. Every time I close my eyes, that is what I see. And what hurts the most is..." Chloe shook her head, looking sad. When I remember your expressions, those moments we shared over the years, I realize I've rarely seen you look like that. But after one moment with him, it sticks with me. Can you understand how painful that is for me? One moment with him, and that is what I remember. With me, it took years to get to that point. Chloe covered her mouth in shock. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. It was just a moment. The night before with you, the excitement, the promise of it all. I was curious and he was there and it just happened. It doesn't mean anything. Jim feels terrible. He and Mark have been searching for you. They think they ruined everything. Chloe, I know it's hard for you to grasp, but saying it's just a mistake doesn't ease my pain. Let me put it this way. If you had woken up and seen me with Wendy, how would you feel? Would hearing me say it's just a mistake make it better? Chloe paused, clearly thinking about what I said. After a moment, she spoke quietly. I understand. I thought about that once I realized you were gone. There was only one reason for you not to be here. I just didn't know what you saw. I kept telling myself what Wendy and Kathy said. They believed once I talked to you, everything would be okay. The offer still stands, you know? All of us? She looked at me with hope, but right then I felt cold inside. No, I don't think so. I can't be around them or Jim or Mark. I think if we were together, it would be very bad. No matter how sorry everyone is, I just can't look at you without feeling disgusted. Chloe cried out. Please, Jay, you mean everything to me. I can't live without you. This was just a terrible mistake. What can I do? How do we fix this? I have to admit, part of me felt a bit pleased to see her in pain, though it didn't compare to how I felt. Maybe it was just my anger that clouded my thoughts, but I was also horrified, both at her pain and my own for causing it. Still, my anger was stronger. Chloe, I'm leaving. I'm leaving you, this house, this marriage, those friendships, and this town. We are finished. What you did is just too much for me to handle. Maybe in the future, but right now, all I can think about is what happened. I'll find a lawyer to contact you. I stood up. I'm sorry it came to this, but you did this. Maybe it was the situation, but this is how it happened, and I have to deal with it. Chloe cried and got up to come closer. I was prepared, moving quickly toward the front door, opening it before she could reach me. I got into my van and drove away, seeing her in the doorway, shaking and crying. I was shaking too, and after a few blocks I pulled over to calm down. Just then, I saw Jim's red Ford Explorer drive past me heading to my old house. I scoffed and thought, of course. As I drove away, I wondered if Chloe would see him again that night. Then I reminded myself, it's none of my business anymore, and tried to put it out of my mind. Not easy. 6 months went by. A lot happened. For 3 months, I was a total mess. I barely took care of myself or my place. I only got enough furniture from Craigslist to sit on. I realized I didn't even need a TV. I just downloaded shows from the internet. I found myself crying at strange times, replaying the moment I woke up in that lodge and my last fight with Chloe over and over, imagining different endings. Chloe tried to reach me several times. She called, but I didn't answer. She emailed me too, and I ignored that as well. I moved once after I received a letter from her. I wasn't sure how she found me, but I figured that if I didn't reply, she might come to see me, so I decided to relocate instead. I hired a lawyer to help me work out some details. She hasn't signed anything yet, but that's fine. There's no rush for me to get married again. But like I said, I was in a bad place. I stopped exercising and doing good things for myself. I drank too much and got into 2 fights. Jim and Mark tried reaching out to me, but they gave up after a few weeks. I talked to my sister and shared a little about my situation. She knows where I am, but no one else does unless they have a private investigator. Jim even contacted my software company, asking if I could do some work for his new business. He mentioned, "Can we put the past behind us?" I found that funny, but I did refer him to a friend of mine who needed the job. I told my friend to increase his price, and Jim agreed without a fuss. I stopped shaving my face and head, and I really noticed how gray my hair was and how thin it had become. Surprisingly, this was what motivated me to start making positive changes in my life. I couldn't just ignore my hair issues, I had to take action. So I decided to shave my head, and that's when I started to think about getting out of my slump. It took me 3 months to accept that I was on my own now, that Chloe was no longer in my life, and that I was by myself. Then, I met Amy. This wasn't just a quick fling. I still don't know why she chose me, especially since I was struggling. But she did, and she turned out to be exactly what I needed. Amy was a fiery redhead, confident and in control of her life, but definitely not of mine. She didn't tolerate nonsense and believed you get one chance, which made you appreciate it even more if you succeeded. She was the most sensible person I ever met, able to understand both sides of any conversation almost instantly. It was a remarkable skill. Somehow I managed to get through it all. We met at a bookstore. I usually read digitally. I love my Kindle, but in my rush to leave Chloe, I forgot a special book by Neil Gaiman that I needed a physical copy of. So I went to a large bookstore with a coffee shop to find it. I ran into Amy in the science fiction section, which was surprising since it's not often you see a woman like her interested in sci-fi. I had a simple chat with her when she asked about a certain author I liked. Later, I saw her again in a coffee shop. She had the only empty chair at her table, so I asked if I could join her. We talked, and she made me laugh, which didn't happen often back then. I felt happier than I had in a long time when I left. She gave me her card and asked me to call her. I didn't call, but we bumped into each other again a week later at the grocery store. We decided to get coffee once more, and somehow we started dating. I wasn't sure about our relationship, but she seemed confident. She was calm, reassuring, and understanding, which was exactly what I needed. She helped me open up a bit more. We went to movies, ate out, and she cleared out my fridge, throwing away all the old food. She suggested improvements to my place, and then, well, we grew closer. Things felt a bit strange at times, but they were also nice. She seemed to know how to make things enjoyable. I could tell she had experiences before, but I never asked her about them. It just wasn't a topic we discussed, and if it came up, she would quickly change the subject. All I knew was that she was new to Portland like me, had few friends, and was content with her life. She was also really easy to look at, tall, with striking red hair that flowed down her back. It was dyed since her skin tone didn't match the usual look for redheads, which made her even more interesting. She wore lovely long dresses and had a soft sense of humor along with a slight New York accent. I felt happy. For the first time in a long time, I could see a future without Chloe, and that was okay. Though the hurt and anger from my past were still there, they were fading away, and Amy was helping me heal. It felt almost too good to be true. She was interested in some of the things I liked. Unlike Chloe, she didn't roll her eyes when I quoted Star Wars. Learning she had never seen The Return of the Jedi was something I couldn't believe, so I bought the Blu-ray that afternoon, and we watched it together with some beer. After the movie, I asked her what she thought, and she said it was an interesting exercise in understanding characters, which I didn't quite grasp at the time but meant to learn about later. Of course, my past came out one night. It was bound to happen. I'll never forget her reply. She comforted me as I cried and said, "It'll be okay. Not all women are like that. Remember, while she hurt you, it was not on purpose. There was no ill intent, just thoughtlessness." As she gently swayed me back and forth, her insight amazed me. Over the next few months, we talked a lot about it. She believed that Chloe's choices were foolish, not mean, and that I needed to think about my own feelings to understand myself better. In many ways, she became Chloe's biggest supporter, and I never fully understood why. Yet she had a way of shifting from serious talks to more intimate moments that kept me captivated. She had this method of making me feel good that drove me wild, but she also knew when to pull back, leaving me wanting more. I realized much later that she mirrored what I had done for her in a special way, and it seemed I had unknowingly shown her what I enjoyed too. Anyway, we were content. She laughed at my jokes and kindly called me out when I was being difficult. 3 months later, and 6 months after the event in Montana, real life interrupted our peace. I received an email which looked odd. It came through Yahoo and seemed to come from the White House, but I knew no one there would be writing to me about my ex-wife. It simply stated, "Your wife is in trouble. If you care for her, you need to come home. A friend." It confused me greatly. I did some light investigating to trace its origin, but I wasn't very motivated. I had no desire to dive back into that situation, so I just ignored it. 2 weeks passed without any news until I got another email. This one said, "She needs you. Things are not going well and she could be in danger. Go home now. A friend." I decided to show this message to Amy. She read it, paused, and then looked at me thoughtfully. "What do you think?" I asked her. She fiddled with a pen and replied, "I don't think it matters what I think, does it?" "Surely your thoughts are important," she said. "I guess," I replied. "I don't really know what to think." "We should discuss this," Amy suggested, taking on a supportive role. "Do you still care about her? I know you're not in love, but it's different." "I'm not sure. I think I do. She was a big part of my life for 9 years. When I say other half, I mean it genuinely." Amy nodded. "I understand. You are someone who truly commits. That's not very common, you know." I chuckled. "Yeah, my friend Mark used to joke about when I would get a different kind of relationship." She tilted her head. "It's good you can still laugh about him. No hard feelings?" "Oh, I'm still really angry at him," I admitted. "But it's more controlled now. If I think about that one night, I feel intense anger, but I can also remember the good times with him and Jim. Did I tell you about our weekend in Vegas? It was quite the adventure." She smiled. "Yes, you've mentioned it a few times." "So what should I do now?" I asked, wanting to get back on track. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe nothing? I feel like that chapter might be closed," I said, looking away. She noticed and gently turned my chin to face her again. "I think you need more closure. You left in a rush, and while it hurt you, you have to remember she didn't mean to. You need to face that within yourself. You don't have to stay, but recognizing it is important. Even though we've only known each other for 3 months, I believe you're a decent person. You left with anger and regret. Cleaning that up could help you too." "Do I still need help?" I asked, feeling her words resonate deeply. She reached out and brushed a tear from my cheek that I hadn't realized was there. "You need to forgive yourself for how you reacted. It was a natural response. You're still upset with yourself. Look, go find out what's happening. I'll be here when you return. We still have time together. It's hard to see you struggle. Maybe this will help you. I think you need to try." I looked at her and smiled, grateful for her support. She took me to the balcony of the loft bedroom. We shared a meaningful moment there, and she gave me a reason to remember her. I was taken aback to realize she wasn't wearing any extra layers under her dress. She leaned slightly against the balcony railing, looking out over the city below. The scene felt both exhilarating and private, high above on the 7th floor. The breeze caught her hair, and she reached for my hand, placing it gently on her shoulder as we stood together, enjoying the quiet view. After a moment she turned, smiling, and led me back inside to the comfortable, dimly lit room. She reached over to the side table and pulled out a bottle of lotion. "Here, try this," she said with a playful smile, inviting me to use some on my hands as we settled together on the bed. She shared a quiet laugh, relaxing as we talked. There was a quiet ease between us as we spent time together, exchanging light-hearted conversation and stories. The evening passed as we enjoyed each other's company, finding comfort in our shared moments. The experience was one of light-hearted fun and warmth, leaving us both feeling closer and happy as we rested there together, appreciating the calm and connection of a memorable evening. It was amazing. When I said I was reaching my limit, she turned around and just sat there, smiling at me. It felt like something out of a movie, and I had never experienced anything like it before. She looked up with a grin and said, "Just so you remember what's waiting for you at home." What a night. But that's why I found myself back in Spokane. I was parked on my street, sitting in my car and wondering what was happening. I really didn't want to go to my old house right then. So, on a whim, I drove to my old local spot. I didn't know why I did it. I knew it would be full of questions about where I had been for the last 6 months, but that felt better than going to my house. I wasn't sure what I would say or why I was even there, but Amy thought it was a good idea, and I needed something familiar. So here I was. I pulled into the lot of the Happy Turnip. Washington bar owners have a funny sense of humor. As I parked, I noticed an old friend, Sam Burlington, leaving the bar. He recognized my car, did a double take, and waved. I rolled down the window. "Hey, Sam." "Jace, where have you been, man? We've all been looking for you. Some people thought you were gone for good." "I'm still here, Sam. Just needed some time away for personal reasons. I don't want to get into it right now." "Got it. Trudy has been asking about you. I really need to run, but are you in town for a while? Maybe we can catch up?" I glanced out the windshield, then back at him. I'm not sure how long I'll be around. I have some things to deal with, but if you see me, let's grab a beer and chat, okay? Sounds good? He offered a fist bump, and I drove into the parking lot, then got out of the car and headed into the bar. After a couple of beers and some brief conversations with old friends, the door opened, and Mark walked in. I noticed him in the bar mirror and sighed. As soon as I saw him, I realized he was connected to Sam. Sam's wife, Trudy, was the PTSO vice president, and Wendy was the president. Of course, Sam had told Trudy he'd seen me. Of course, she had called Wendy. Of course, Mark knew what was going on. It looked like the only way to face this was to talk to Mark. Unless I was ready to avoid him, a conversation was inevitable. I turned my head and felt him sit down next to me. He called to the bartender, "A beer for me and whatever my friend is having." "Oh, we're friends again, Mark," I replied, surprised at my own bitterness. He turned towards me. "Jay, I don't know how to apologize enough. We really misunderstood everything. I know Chloe has already told you this, but I need to say it myself. I'm really sorry. We know we ruined a friendship for no good reason. It was just a brief encounter. Sure, it was enjoyable, but that was all it was. If I could change it, I would." I leaned back and ignored the drink in front of me, waiting for the bartender to walk away. "I'm sure you would, Mark, but you can't. I'll tell you this. It's a good thing you're here and not Jim. I might lose my cool with him. I should be upset with you too, but honestly, it's not worth my energy." Mark swallowed hard and leaned on the bar. "I guess I get that. When Chloe told me what you saw when you woke up, I'm surprised we're even still here. I don't think I could handle it without getting really hurt." I let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, I'm definitely hurt. Just trying not to let it show right now." I took a deep breath. "What's on your mind, Mark? You need to talk so you can move on?" "Actually, I came to share that and to give you a warning." "A warning about what?" "Chloe has a new roommate." "She what?" I said, setting down the drink and giving him my full attention. "She had to find a way to pay the bills. She's a nurse and you aren't there anymore. She wanted to keep the house because of the memories it holds. She had to rent out a room to help with the costs." "What? Where are you two in all of this? Why isn't Jim stepping in? He helped her before." I was surprised by my own anger. I didn't realize I still cared. Maybe Amy was right. She won't accept help from either of us. You know Chloe, once she decides something, she sticks to it. She feels that our friendship has already cost her enough. I paused and thought about what he said. It did seem true. If Chloe felt regret, I was sure she would react this way. She wouldn't cut off contact, but she would be careful with it. "So she has a roommate. I hope it works out for her," I said, trying to convince myself that I didn't mind. "Well, this guy. I need to be honest, he's one of my guys. He does installations, but when I recommended him, I didn't know he had some issues." "Issues? What kind?" "We've received some complaints. Some women he worked for said he made them uncomfortable, even saying some inappropriate things. One said he touched her inappropriately, which we had to pay to resolve." "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice rising as I felt the anger boil. "First you get involved with my wife, and now you put a guy in her home who could be dangerous?" Mark looked down, clearly unhappy. "We just found out he has a past with serious issues from 10 years ago. I can't let him go for that, but you deserve to know. I don't know what can be done about this, but you need to know. Where have you been? Why haven't you acted? You're usually the first to handle things like this. I can't, Jay. I'm his boss. If I do anything, it could lead to a lawsuit for managing poorly. He already did that to the window installer company he worked with before. That manager lost his job. My hands are tied. But now that you're here, you can help. She'll listen to you. She's too scared to reach out to him now." "She's what?" I almost shouted. This wasn't my Chloe. She used to be confident and able to stand up for herself. There was no way she would let someone walk all over her. Mark turned to me again. "Jay, things have changed a lot since you left. I don't know what you said to her when you left, but she just fell apart. She's not the person she used to be. You think you have it bad from what I see? She's much worse off. Go see her, and you'll understand." I took a last sip of my beer and set the bottle down. "Mark, you really are something. What kind of friend are you to either of us?" He looked embarrassed and stared at the ground as I left the bar without looking back. I drove straight to my old house and knocked on the door. The lights were on and her car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home, but there was no answer. I knocked again, but silence followed, although I noticed shadows moving inside. I walked around to the side of the house and peered in through the window. The place looked the same, but messier, with some new things in the living room. As I looked around, I saw him inside. Mark was right. He was trouble. He wore a tank top, shorts, had tattoos, and he looked unkempt and like he'd been drinking. I stepped back and he didn't see me. I watched him grab another beer, spilling some on himself as he drank. "You can't stay locked in the bathroom forever, honey babe. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want some company, you know? You're always talking about that awful ex-husband. You need someone too. We can treat each other nicely. Wouldn't that be good?" If I thought I was angry before, it reached a whole new level now. My ex-wife had shut herself in the bathroom because she was scared of this man. I didn't think about it. I just acted. Nobody should live in fear, no matter what had happened between us. I walked back to the front of the house, hoping she hadn't changed the locks, and tried my old key in the door. It worked, and I felt a wave of relief. I opened the door, only to find a golf club pointed at me. My old reflexes are still there, but they're definitely slower. I ducked just enough to avoid a serious hit, but the club grazed my head. It only made me angrier, but didn't slow me down. I walked in, and he muttered something about home invasion and swung again. I expected this, so I stepped aside and blocked his swing with my right arm. I leaned in and gently bumped my head against his. I felt something break, and when he winced and held his face, I grabbed his left arm, twisted it, and it came out of its place. He cried out again, and I caused another little injury, but at that moment, he couldn't bother me anymore while I took care of Chloe. Before moving on, I bent down and grabbed his ear, twisting it slightly. He moaned and pulled back, clearly scared of more hurt. "Let me explain something to you. The ex-husband is back and you're done. You tripped and hurt yourself. I don't care how, but you're out of here. When I come down again, you better be gone or I'll make sure it's worse for you. Do you understand?" He nodded, blood still dripping from his face. "If I hear that you're still bothering any woman, I'll return." His eyes widened in fear. "Oh yes, I know what you've done. It stops now or you won't know when I'll be back. But I will come back and it won't be easy for you." He stammered something about not wanting that and tried to rise. I walked away toward the stairs, not thinking about it anymore. I had intimidated him and made him afraid, and while it was for a good reason, sometimes I surprised myself with what I could do. I headed to the bathroom, knowing she would be there. I was angry and didn't think straight. Instead of calling out to let her know I was here, I kicked the door open, only to be met with something aimed at my head. This time it was the towel holder. It didn't hurt much, but I felt it cut my skin. I grabbed it and pulled it away from Chloe, who had finally recognized me. "Oh my God!" she screamed. "Jay! Thank God! Oh my God!" She collapsed into my arms. "Is he here? Is he gone?" she asked, trembling and holding me tightly. "It's okay," I said, stroking her hair. "I asked him to leave. He's gone. I can't. Oh my God, you're here. I can't believe it. He was so, I just, Jay, thank goodness you're here." She cried softly in my arms. I wanted to make things better for her, but all I could see were her closed eyes. A lot of my anger was gone, but the hurt remained. As much as I cared for her, I realized I still did. I couldn't stay. It all felt too new and painful. I picked Chloe up in my arms and took her downstairs to show her he was gone. Just like I promised, he was. The front door was still open, and I noticed some signs of a struggle, but he was definitely gone. I closed and locked the door. I sat her down and went to get her a drink, making her take a shot. She didn't take her eyes off me the entire time. She was quiet, but still trembling. As I handed her the drink, she reached up and pulled me down. I thought she was going to kiss me, but instead she wanted to check the cut on my head. She took the shot in one go and then said, "I need to clean that." She stood up, took my hand, and led me to the bathroom. I glanced in the mirror and didn't look good at all. The cut on my head had bled a bit, and my shirt was stained where I had been in a rough situation. I also had a bruise on my forehead. Chloe grabbed a towel, wet it, and started to clean me up. I kept my eyes on her as she took care of me. When she finished, she stepped back and said, "I think you'll be okay. If we were at a hospital, I might suggest stitches, but I think you'll heal just fine. There might be a little mark, but it won't be noticeable unless you get sunburned, and we both know you rarely do." She gave me a kind smile, and it made my heart feel full. Then she sat down next to me as I sat on the toilet, wrapping her arms around my neck. "I've missed you so much. I just didn't know how to—" She was shaking, showing a mix of emotions. I let her stay close for a moment, then gently pulled away and stood up. "Chloe," I started to say. She looked down and spoke softly. "I know, you won't stay. I understand. I don't deserve that anyway." "Let's go to the living room. We can't talk here," I suggested. I picked her up and we walked back to the living room. She sat on the couch while I took a chair and we looked at each other. "Jay," she began slowly, "I know I made mistakes. We all did. We've talked about it and we know how hard it was for you. We don't have any excuses. We built stories in our minds, but they were just ways to justify our actions. I don't know what to say. I am so truly sorry. Is there any hope?" I looked at her and was quiet for a moment, thinking about what to say. Even my silence spoke to her. She looked down and said, "I understand. I just want you to know you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I miss you deeply, and I know I will never feel whole without you. But I understand." "Chloe," I said, "you will always mean the world to me. You are the other half of my heart. But I can't stop thinking about you with Jim. It's hard for me to shake off those thoughts. When I look at you, I feel hurt and frustrated. I'm not here to be mean. I'm sorry about my anger last time, but I think you can see why I felt that way." She looked up for a moment, smiled, and shook her head. "I deserved it, and more. I know I made mistakes. We all realize we let things get out of hand. We should have waited and talked about it. I don't know. Chloe, I didn't know you were struggling so much with money. I can help a little, so you won't have to take in people. It just didn't work out here, did it?" She looked back at me with a hint of hope. "I know. I can't believe I did that. I just needed to. I couldn't pay the bills. At first it was nice having someone around, but he became messy and difficult. He still owes me for the last month." "Okay, no more roommates, all right?" I said softly. She nodded and bit her lip, clearly wanting to say something. "J.I., there hasn't been anyone else for me. I tried again with Jim, Kathy, Mark, and Wendy, but it just felt wrong without you. I needed to do something to stop the pain, though. Have you?" The question hung in the air. I looked at her for a moment, nodded, and then stood up. It was time to go. I didn't want to bring up Amy. She had already been through enough that night. As I left, Chloe stood at the door watching me, looking really sad. It reminded me of how I felt when I looked in the mirror that night. On my drive back to Portland, I thought about what I had learned that evening and what the future might hold. I called Mark to share what happened and suggested he and Wendy visit Chloe and support her. I made it clear we were not friends and mentioned the other things they had tried, but I was calling for Chloe. He just said, "Ah," and ended the call. When I arrived back in Portland, Amy didn't answer my call. I shrugged it off and focused on a new contract I had. I spent 3 enjoyable days working deeply in Python and PHP, creating a new server back-end for a game company. It was the kind of work that lets you lose track of time while learning new skills. I also picked up my novel, which had been sitting on my laptop since the Montana event. It felt strange to step back into this, but I decided it was what I wanted. I knew where she lived, but I realized I didn't know exactly where Amy worked. I understood her job. She was a remote research assistant for a university, helping PhD students with their data and studies. From what she mentioned, it seemed like she was in Portland because something unfortunate had happened at her last job. Still, I didn't know where she did her research since I had never asked, and she hadn't shared that information. Our relationship was like that. We talked about what we wanted but didn't pry into each other's lives. After the last 6 months, I was okay with that. Eventually, Amy called and we set up a lunch date. I met her at her favorite French sandwich shop. She had introduced me to the Croque Monsieur and its counterpart, the Croque Madame. I loved them both. When she arrived, she looked different. Her hair was now blonde and much shorter. She greeted me with a smile as she sat down. "Surprise!" she said, and I was taken aback. "Wow," I said, "that's quite a change." She smiled again, then looked at the menu. "I'll be honest. Sending you away was a big risk for me. I wasn't sure if you would come back. I needed a change, something fresh." "Oh, I definitely remember changes," I replied with a grin. Amy's reaction surprised me. She kept flipping through the menu even though she knew it well and said quietly, "I don't expect that every night." I sensed something was off but couldn't quite figure it out. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "Oh no," she said with a bright smile. "Just a work thing, a project that's taking longer than I expected. It's not a big deal, just not going according to plan." I chuckled. "Oh, I've had those too. I had a contract that went 6 weeks past the due date and I still didn't get paid. But I love the new look. It's like I'm with a whole new person. Are you hiding from someone?" I joked. She looked at me and there was something in her eyes that made me quiet down. She seemed to notice and shifted the conversation to a new movie she wanted to see. I wanted to believe we could pick up right where we left off, but something felt subtly different. On the surface, it seemed the same, but I sensed a change. I thought maybe she had second thoughts about sending me back to Spokane, or the closeness we had before I left. It felt like the nature of our relationship had shifted, and she had shown me more than she was comfortable with at that moment. I thought Amy needed some time to herself, so I decided to give her space. I had my own problems to handle, and I didn't want to take on hers too. Over the next few weeks, life slowly got back to a normal routine after the event in Montana. I didn't think much more about it. Then, 3 weeks later, Amy called me. She wanted me to come over because we had something to talk about. When I arrived, I felt really nervous. In my younger days, when someone said that, it usually meant they were breaking up with me. I didn't think that was what was happening here, but I was uncertain about everything. The older I got, the less I felt I understood what women wanted. I parked at Amy's apartment and went inside. I passed a red sports car and noticed it was the same type Chloe drove. What a coincidence. Using the key Amy had given me, I opened her door and jokingly announced my arrival. I got no response and headed into the living room. Amy sat at her dinner table with a coffee while Chloe was on the couch. She stood up when I entered, catching me off guard. A flood of questions filled my mind. What was she doing here? How had she found me, especially since she was with Amy? I glanced at Amy, who looked completely calm and smiled at me. This made me wonder where to sit. Should I sit with Amy or with Chloe? To avoid that choice, I grabbed a chair from the dinner table and placed it right between them so I could see both of them. I noticed a slight smile from Amy as I did this. She seemed to understand my struggle. "Hello, Chloe," I said as casually as I could, trying to figure out what to say next. "What brings you to Portland?" Chloe sat back down, looking quite nervous. She didn't seem well. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her hair looked unwashed but quickly combed, and her clothes were mismatched. I noted that they were outfits I liked her in, though there was a small stain on her blouse that she usually wouldn't let happen. Chloe glanced at Amy, who gave her an encouraging smile. I couldn't believe how well Amy was handling the situation. Here was my ex-wife, the one who had hurt me so much before, yet she was having coffee and making small talk with Amy while I arrived. I didn't think I could have managed that. Amy signaled for Chloe to continue. I just can't be without you. I know it's over between us, and I brought that upon myself. I have to pay for my mistakes, but I just can't go on without you in my life. I need you too much. Even if we can't be together, I just want to be near you. Even if... She faltered and looked at Amy. "You've moved on." I opened my mouth, then closed it again, not sure how to respond. I looked back at Amy and she met my gaze with an almost playful expression. I realized Chloe was finding some enjoyment in my discomfort. She liked watching me squirm and struggle with tough choices. I promised myself I would talk to her about this later and show her where she was wrong. I turned back to her and needed to ask something, so I said, "How did you find me?" Chloe looked at me and explained, "Jim hired a private detective to track you down. We needed to know you were okay. That's how I found you before. We care about you a lot, and we know we messed up. We've been keeping an eye on you. We couldn't just forget about it." She said that with a weight that I didn't quite understand then. I nodded, knowing Mark and Jim would have done the same, even if I wasn't there to think it through. "Well, that's nice. Thank you," I said, trying to be sarcastic, but it came out unexpectedly sincere. "How have you been? You look..." I couldn't finish because it was clear that she was not doing well, and I didn't want to say it. "I look terrible," she admitted, brushing her hair aside. "I'm a total mess, Jay. I cry all the time, and I've had to take time off work because the doctors are worried I might make mistakes with patients. I can't blame them. Sometimes I think about doing something to stop these feelings. Her words worried me. Even at my worst, I had never thought of harming myself or using something to escape. I leaned in and said, "That's not the answer, Chloe. You know that." She replied with a weak smile, but at least it was a smile. "I know, it's just so lonely. I miss you so much. I thought we would always be together." I leaned back and said, "Well." For the first time, I could smile about our past, and that surprised me. "The thing is, Jay, I just need some time here. I need you around. I need you to support me. When you came into the bathroom, I felt like my heart would burst seeing you. You've always been my hero, and there you were again helping me. When you left, I knew we were really over, and that made me even sadder. But I decided to take whatever I could get. So I called Mark and Jim, got your address, and came to see if there was any way to fix things. They told me about Amy, and even though you've moved on, I just can't yet." I glanced at Amy to see her reaction. She had a hint of a smile, which made me hesitate to ask what Mark and Jim thought about her being here at Amy's apartment. I spent a lot of time there, but it wasn't my place. "Amy, I need to know what you think." Amy set her coffee cup down and caught me off guard again when she said, "I think you need to get used to Chloe being around." I invited her to stay with me, and she said yes, at least for the next couple of weeks. "You did what?" I said, standing up in surprise. Amy stayed calm and quiet until I realized I should sit back down. "I think this will work for everyone. I wanted to get to know Chloe better. She needs a place to stay, and it's easy for her to see you when you come to visit me. Plus, if you look at it this way, she gets to see you happy with someone else. Sorry, but we need to be honest about this," she said to Chloe. "If you stay here, you need to understand things. You hurt him, and he might still want to make you aware of that. We are together and will remain so. We just need clear boundaries. You might see and hear things you wouldn't like." Chloe nodded. She didn't look thrilled, but she accepted it. "I deserve this. I made a mistake that I can't take back. It's fair for me to face the consequences," she said bravely, putting on a face that showed she was uncomfortable but also knew this was the right thing. "And you," Amy added, "don't get any ideas. No sneaking around or anything like that. Got it?" I looked at Amy. Honestly, I hadn't thought about that until now, and now that it was brought up, it made me think. I chuckled a bit to cover my sudden thoughts and said, "I think I'm done with that, Amy. My past experiences haven't been great." Amy nodded. "I can imagine. So, are we all clear? Do we understand the rules?" Chloe nodded again. I felt like I was just along for the ride, so I asked, "What if I'm not okay with all of this?" Amy looked at me and said, "Then what? What will you do if you're not?" Good question. I had no plan, and honestly, I was still surprised by Chloe's arrival, especially the news that she was staying with Amy. I was trying to catch up in the worst way. "Guess I'll just go quietly then. Chloe, welcome here. I need to leave now. This is a lot to think about." Amy nodded. "Yes, I need to help Chloe settle in too." I felt like there was something more going on. I couldn't quite figure it out, but something was bothering me. Maybe it was just me feeling overwhelmed. I needed to figure out how to act around Chloe now that she was living with my girlfriend. That promised to bring about some awkward moments. I walked out of Amy's apartment and headed straight to a local bar for a beer. I felt like I needed something to help me deal with all these heavy thoughts. 2 weeks went by quickly, and I was surprised by how fast time passed. I was very careful about Chloe being around. I tried to get Amy to come over to my place, but she didn't like my apartment and kept inviting me to hers. We went on many dates, but we never quite got closer. Eventually, I grew tired of the situation and asked her directly, "Are we done with intimacy? What's going on here?" Amy sighed, put down her coffee while we were at Starbucks, and replied, "I don't have a problem. You just aren't at my place when the right moment comes." "You know why? Can we go to my place instead?" "No, I don't think so. You need to get past this, and Chloe has to accept the idea of you being with someone else. She needs to move on as well. She won't do that if she keeps hanging around you." After that talk, I made an effort to be at Amy's place more. I saw more of Chloe, although it always felt awkward. Either she was arriving as I was leaving or the other way around. We had some awkward moments, but slowly we also shared some nice ones. Chloe tried not to interfere with Amy, and I started to see her old self come back. She began working out, dressing better, and eating well. It was like watching a flower bloom again. Sometimes we had coffee together, and I found myself feeling more relaxed around her. I chose to see her as just a good friend with whom I shared a lot of memories. When she shared with me hesitantly about the 2 dates she had since we broke up, both set up by our friends, I sat back and laughed at the stories. The guys had turned out to be quite strange, and it was amusing. Then I realized how far I had come to feel comfortable with her dating. I no longer felt the need to remember that she was my ex and that her choices were her own. The only slightly awkward moment happened when she placed her hand on mine after telling her stories. She said, "You know why those dates didn't work, right?" I had a witty reply about nerds not communicating enough, but Chloe continued, "Because they weren't you. I just wanted you. I can't seem to move on." Another time, during lunch, I told her about my excitement for a new mobile app I was creating. I had been recommended by a university think tank that received a grant for researching crowdsourcing. They were using part of the money to develop a mobile app that would ask daily questions and gather responses from those who had it installed. Every day, there was a prize of $1,000 for a winner to encourage people to participate. The goal was to see how well crowdsourced research worked and to understand what kinds of questions and rewards would get the public interested. Would $1,000 be enough to find out what color pants Angelina Jolie was wearing that day, or would everyone want to give it a try? She found it fascinating, like many of the projects I worked on, and shared a few tips and ideas. It felt like old times, and it wasn't until I stood up to leave that I remembered we were no longer married, and things were different now. I always made sure to avoid being at Amy's place when Chloe was around. However, one night, life took a different turn. It was Halloween. Amy had been suggesting we have a memorable time, and she was right. I was told plainly that wearing a costume was a must, and that we would be going to a party. I found it intriguing since in the 4 months we had been together, I had not met any of her friends, making me curious about who might be inviting her. I thought hard about what costume to wear and eventually decided on an Indiana Jones outfit, complete with a hat and a toy whip. When I arrived at Amy's apartment, Chloe was just leaving. She looked stunning in a short red dress that fit her perfectly. I had never seen that dress before, and I wanted to ask about it, but the moment didn't come up. She mentioned she was heading to a party hosted by a nurse she used to know back in Spokane who had moved here. She looked fantastic, and it was impressive how much she had changed from 4 weeks earlier when she had appeared quite unkempt. I mentally noted to ask her when she would be back to work. Being out for 4 weeks must have been tough for her financially, and I figured she'd need to return soon. After she left, smiling at me, Amy came out of her bedroom, and I was taken aback. She was dressed like a schoolgirl, the kind you might find in stories. She wore a blonde wig tied in a ponytail and had on bright makeup with red lipstick and eyeshadow. Her white blouse was buttoned low, showing a black bra beneath. A loosely tied school tie hung around her neck. Her blue skirt was short and held together with a shiny safety pin. She had on sheer stockings held up with a garter belt, which made a strong impression on me. I noticed this because she made a big deal of bending down in front of me to fix her shoes, which didn't really need fixing, and her skirt went up just enough for me to catch a glimpse of her stockings. I sensed how the night might unfold from that moment. It was clear she knew what I liked based on our past talks. She turned to me, smiled, and asked, "Do you like it?" I stepped closer, wrapped my arms around her, and playfully leaned in, saying, "What do you think? Do we really have to go to this party?" She laughed, pushed me back gently, and said, "What kind of girl do you think I am?" I chuckled and replied, "Well, a very charming schoolgirl, I suppose." She tilted her head slightly and said, "Wrong. My costume tonight is representing my boyfriend's fantasy." I wasn't sure how to answer that. It felt like a big compliment, but I worried what others might think. She must have seen my concern because she quickly added, "But don't worry, you're the only one who will know." The relief must have shown on my face because she couldn't help but add, "That you have a schoolgirl fantasy, not that you're alone in that." She grabbed her bag, took a final glance in the mirror, and asked, "Shall we go?" As we left for the car, I noticed people staring at us. I felt both proud and nervous, but it was Halloween after all. This was part of the fun. We got into her car, and as we buckled in, I asked, "Where is this party? Who's hosting it?" "It's at a club. Don't worry, it's right up your alley." I felt uneasy when we pulled into the parking lot of a well-known club. She noticed my reaction and said, "Don't worry. It's going to be an interesting night and you're going to love it." When we reached the entrance, our names were checked off a list, and then we went inside. The atmosphere was lively, and to my surprise, it was filled with couples. There weren't any lonely guys, just couples enjoying the night. Amy noticed me looking around and squeezed my hand, pulling me close. "It's couples only night. It's a Halloween tradition. Someone I know rents the place for this night and invites select couples. The drinks are free, but if you want a private dance, there's a charge for that." We made our way to the bar, ordered our drinks, and after I got my beer, I took a moment to look around. Everyone was in costume, and most of them were quite stylish. I set my beer down and turned to Amy, who was also taking in the scene. As we walked through the lively party, I looked over at Amy and decided to ask something that had been on my mind. "Amy, I just have to ask, is this one of those parties?" I said, trying to be tactful. She smiled, tilting her head with a playful glint in her eye. "No, Jace, it's just a Halloween party at a club. Sure, people come here to unwind and things might happen if you're interested, but there's no expectation. Just enjoy yourself." She looked at me, waiting for my answer. I took a deep breath, picked up my drink, and thought for a moment. I think I'm good just hanging out. After the past year, I'm not quite ready for all that, but I don't mind sticking around to enjoy the night. Amy smiled, clearly pleased, and gave my arm a friendly pat. "Let's grab a booth then," she said, leading us to a cozy spot on the side. Over the next few hours, we relaxed and enjoyed a few drinks as various people stopped by to say hello. Dancers came over to chat, and a few friendly couples joined us briefly, though they moved on once they saw we were just here to enjoy the vibe. It was a lively night, and the energy was infectious, making it hard not to enjoy ourselves. After the last group left, Amy looked at me with a mischievous smile. She leaned in and whispered, "All right, Jace, I'm telling you, I'm ready to dance, even if you're not." She gestured toward one of the dancers, a tall woman in a vibrant red dress who was captivating the room. I had noticed her earlier. She had a natural charm that made her stand out. I motioned politely to the dancer, and she made her way over, taking a seat beside us. I quickly adjusted myself to be a bit more discreet, but she seemed to notice anyway, giving us a knowing smile. "Don't worry," she said, laughing lightly. "This is a lively place and nothing surprises me anymore. People sometimes try to get a bit too comfortable here." She shrugged, making it clear she'd seen it all. Amy, still amused, said with a warm grin, "So, you wouldn't mind joining us for a bit?" The dancer smiled at Amy. "Oh, absolutely. You two seem like fun," she replied, relaxing as we all shared in the easy, light-hearted energy of the evening. "I'm not saying I'd never do it, just not with them." She looked at us and added, "But you two, that's a different story." "I'm Amy, and this is Jace," said Amy, reaching out her hand to the girl. "I'm Wonton," she replied, shaking Amy's hand. "That's the name I go by here. The owner isn't great, but I make more money here than at other places in Portland." Amy chuckled lightly. "Yeah, it's interesting. I've been to a few clubs, and this one seems a bit off. Bing, bing, more topics for later." She was building up our conversation. "You're right about that," Wonton said, smiling with bright teeth. "But hey, time is money. Are you up for a dance?" Amy glanced at me. I'm still surprised she just said that, and replied, "Actually, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. What I really want is a break. Can we get that here?" Wonton smiled wider this time. "For $100, you can have a good time. Follow me." She stood up and reached for Amy's hand, which Amy took. I grabbed our drinks and stood to follow, amazed at my luck and the way Amy carried herself. We moved to the back of the club, where there was a hallway with small spaces, guarded by a large man in a fitted suit. He nodded at Wonton, and then glanced at me as we passed. The spaces didn't have doors, but they were covered with curtains. Most were closed, and from the sounds we heard, someone had the same idea as Amy. We reached the last space, which had a large couch and a small coffee table. Wonton closed the curtain and said, "I need cash in advance. Sorry. You seem all right, but it's just easier this way." I checked my pockets, but Amy put her hand on my arm and shook her head. "I got this," she said, taking $100 from her purse and giving it to Wonton, who slipped it into a small bag around her neck. "Great," she smiled. "Now, about that dance? We won't be disturbed here, so feel free to enjoy yourselves." Without hesitation, Amy started to adjust her outfit. Wonton began to sway, slowly making her movements more graceful and keeping her eyes on me. Amy leaned closer, and I found myself captivated by the scene before me. This continued for a while, and then Amy, taking a deep breath, said, "I really need a break, and I want to take this all in." Amy stood up, smoothed her skirt, and then surprised me by walking over to Wonton, giving her a friendly, playful hug. They shared a warm moment, laughing as though they were close friends who hadn't seen each other in a while. I was taken aback, both by Amy's confidence and the easygoing energy between them. It felt like I was seeing a different side of her, one that was comfortable and relaxed in this lively, carefree environment. Wonton seemed equally at ease, laughing and chatting with Amy as if they'd known each other forever. Amy turned to me, motioning for me to make some room on the couch, where we all settled in, sharing stories and enjoying the light-hearted atmosphere. We continued to chat, laughter filling the room as the three of us enjoyed the evening. I leaned back, enjoying the relaxed and friendly vibe of the moment. Amy smiled at me and took my hand, squeezing it with a playful grin, clearly having a great time. The room was filled with warmth and ease, and we all stayed in that comfortable space, sharing light-hearted stories late into the evening. Amy leaned close, smiling as we all shared a laugh. She seemed more relaxed than ever, like she was fully enjoying the moment. Wonton grinned back, clearly at ease too, and they exchanged a friendly hug that seemed to capture the light-hearted spirit of the evening. We found ourselves laughing together over stories and friendly jokes, and the energy between us felt easygoing and natural. As we continued to talk, Wonton shared some funny stories from her work, and Amy chimed in with a few tales of her own, bringing everyone into the light, easy atmosphere. It was clear they both felt comfortable, adding to the relaxed mood of the night. After a while, we settled back into our seats, each enjoying the music and the friendly energy that filled the room. Amy turned to me with a smile, seeming happy to just be there together, and Wonton joined in, adding her own warmth to the moment. The evening unfolded like a pleasant gathering of friends, full of laughter and good company, creating a lasting memory of a carefree, enjoyable night. Amy and I shared a light-hearted evening with friends, and as we wrapped up, everyone seemed in high spirits. We enjoyed a lot of laughs, a few drinks, and plenty of good company. It had been a memorable night, one where everyone let go of daily worries and enjoyed the moment. Amy was especially happy, and her warmth was infectious. As we got ready to head out, Amy smiled, thanking Wonton and leaving a generous tip to show her appreciation for the night. Wonton grinned and thanked us both, giving a playful bow before showing us the way out. The drive home was quiet, but the mood was peaceful, like the feeling you get after a great evening with friends. I felt content, carrying the relaxed joy of the night with me. Once home, though, a quick look around reminded me of how busy things had been lately. The apartment showed signs of the week's chaos, with a few things left out of place. But that didn't matter. The evening had been uplifting, and I knew tomorrow would be a fresh start. Amy and I settled in, grateful for a good night that left us feeling closer and ready for whatever came next. Her car was parked outside, and the guest room door was shut tight. I looked at Amy, and she met my gaze. Then she said, "Could you get me a drink? And maybe a beer for you? You need to relax." I raised my eyebrow, but chose not to say anything. I got the drinks, and we settled onto the couch. She clinked her bottle and drank half of it in one go. I took a sip and said, "So?" Amy smiled and leaned back. "Did you enjoy yourself tonight?" I replied, trying to think of an answer. "Yeah, I figured," she said. "And what did we learn?" After a moment I said, "You like girls too? That's pretty cool, by the way." "Oh, that's minor. I've experienced a lot, Jace. I was thinking more about how you're not completely against group situations." My smile faded and I shifted back. Was this a test? Amy seemed to notice and quickly added, "Look, it's just a casual thing, Jace. I didn't really set anything up, but being there was kind of a surprise. Don't feel bad about it. You had a good time. You gotta do something many guys wish for but don't get to try, so take pride in that." I considered her words and nodded. "Okay, I can go with that." Amy smiled again, finished her drink, set the bottle down, and said, Now I'm ready for bed, but I need you to do something for me first. I smiled, feeling a spark of anticipation. Then Amy dropped a surprising request. Jace, I want you to go talk to Chloe. I froze, bottle almost at my lips. What? You really want me to go to Chloe's room? Yes, she replied. Look around. She's back and she isn't happy. She might have been crying. She's working through a lot and she sees you here with me. You did to her what she did to you and it seems you're holding on to it. I wasn't sure how to respond. Amy, this isn't on me. I'm sorry she's feeling this way, but it wasn't my choice. She sighed and said, I understand. Her feelings are partly her own fault, but she isn't going to move forward until she knows you've forgiven her. She's not a bad person. She made some mistakes. She got carried away and she knows it. She's not trying to blame you. For how much longer does she have to suffer? Talk to her so she understands that you're okay with what happened. But talking? Couldn't I just send her a note? Isn't this a bit much? Are you really going to do this just to say I forgive you? I said, feeling uncertain. Amy looked at me softly and said, Jay, this is the biggest gesture of forgiveness. Don't you understand? I understood her point, but I still felt uneasy. My girlfriend was asking me to be with my ex-wife. What about you? After everything we've shared tonight, how can you ask me to do this? How is this okay for you? Amy held my hands in hers and replied, Jay, because of what we did today, I can accept this. I know where your heart is. But Chloe needs this, and I can't feel right unless we address it. No one expects you to get back together with her, just help her feel better tonight. Now I'm going to bed. Gather your thoughts and go help her. She stood up and headed to the bedroom, adding, and try to be quiet, just let yourself out when you're done. I sat there, shocked and confused. I could see her reasoning, but I still struggled with how this was the right choice. My mind was tangled with thoughts. I sat there for almost 5 minutes when suddenly Chloe's door opened. She stepped out toward the kitchen but froze when she noticed me on the couch. Oh, Jay, she said softly. I'm sorry. She turned to go back to her room, but I called out, Chloe, wait. She was still in the stunning red dress she had worn earlier, looking beautiful, but her eyes were swollen from crying. She paused and turned to me, curious. How was your night? I asked, hesitating. Oh, she replied, glancing down with a sad smile. It was terrible. I spent the night alone. I just wasn't in the mood to party. Someone bothered me, and when I pushed back, it turned into a mess, so I left. How was your evening? I figured it was best to keep it simple and said, It had its ups and downs. Can you sit with me for a minute? She hesitated, but then replied, Sure, and took the seat where Amy had been moments earlier. I think we need to talk, I said. She looked at me, waiting for me to continue. I know I was upset, you can see why. I said things I regret, I'm sorry for that. I feel we should clear the air. I know you made a mistake, and it wasn't intentional. You're not a bad person. I realize I've hurt you, and I know how hard it must have been to see me with Amy. I just want you to know that I'm okay now. I may never fully understand what happened, but I don't hold it against you anymore. I want you to be okay too. Chloe sat there, looking at me in silence. She sat there, her face shifting as she tried to hold back tears, but soon she broke down, crying openly. I felt unsure of what to do at first, but then instinct took over. I moved closer and hugged her. She leaned into my shoulder, letting her emotions out as I held her, simply being there until her tears began to ease. After a few moments, she pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes and managing a small, grateful smile. You have no idea how much I needed that, she said softly. I took a deep breath and replied, I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. I'm still working through things, but I'm not holding on to anger anymore. At least not toward you. Before I could say more, she leaned in and kissed me. It caught me completely off guard, and I froze for a moment, then found myself returning the kiss. But reality set in quickly, and I gently pulled back, clearing my throat. Look, that was unexpected. I'm with someone else now. She looked at me with a strong, determined expression. If I want to share a moment with you, I'm not going to be told no, she said firmly, reminding me of the confident person I'd known before. I hesitated, half laughing as I tried to lighten the moment. Well, technically we're not together anymore, I said, instantly realizing it might not be the wisest thing to say. She raised an eyebrow and, matter-of-factly, replied, I didn't sign anything ending that. Her words stopped me in my tracks. She was technically correct, and I found myself unsure of what to say. Before I could sort it all out, she leaned in again, and I returned her embrace, letting myself be caught up in the moment. Chloe looked at me with a confident, almost mischievous grin, fully engaged in the moment. Her humor and carefree attitude were something new, catching me off guard as I realized we were both just going with the flow, enjoying each other's company without expectations. She leaned in and joked, "Quite the night, huh?" with a laugh that lightened the entire mood. We exchanged smiles, each knowing this was an unusual, spontaneous evening, one to remember without overthinking it. She rose, waving for me to follow her down the hallway, her playful side leading the way as we moved toward her room. I took off my shoes, stepping carefully so I wouldn't trip over myself, feeling a bit ridiculous, but laughing all the same. When I got to her room, Chloe was already relaxed on the bed, looking comfortable and at ease. Her carefree vibe continued as we shared a few more laughs, leaning into the easygoing spirit of the night. With a smile, she beckoned me over, and we spent the next while simply talking and reminiscing. It was like revisiting old memories with a close friend, and I realized how much I appreciated that connection. The evening unfolded with warmth and laughter, a refreshing break from the routine, and one that reminded me of the comfort found in shared memories and familiar company. We drifted through the night in conversation, taking the time to appreciate a rare and meaningful moment together. It was a memory I knew I'd look back on, a reminder of the close bond we still shared, and the laughter we could always count on to bring us together. It was a quiet moment, and she kissed me softly while looking deeply into my eyes. I really wished I could understand what she was thinking. We connected in a way that felt nice and right. I wasn't ready to take our relationship to a deeper level, but I didn't want to treat her poorly either. It's hard to describe when I reached the end. She softly encouraged me, saying, "You can do it. I need this." It was unusual for her to say that, but everything felt different between us at that moment. When it was over, I tried to move away, but she held on to me. She wrapped her legs around me, keeping me close. "Oh no, you aren't going anywhere yet," she said with a smile. I felt so at ease in her embrace. We just lay there together, her hand gently resting on my head as I listened to her heartbeat. I think we stayed like that for about half an hour. I could feel myself getting sleepy, and I knew I needed to leave. It had been a long day, and I had a lot on my mind that I needed to sort out. I carefully pulled away from Chloe, who was softly snoring by then, got off the bed, found my clothes, and quietly left the apartment. The next day, I reflected on what happened, and felt lucky. But then I remembered why I was in that situation. While it was nice, I would have preferred to still be happily married. I had lunch with Amy the following day, and I couldn't look her in the eye. She seemed amused by my discomfort. "What's wrong?" she teased while sipping her soup at our favorite Chinese restaurant. "Lost your voice?" I was surprised that she seemed to know so much. Did the girls share everything? I wondered about the workers who made our clothes, especially since it seemed like things were changing rapidly. "Look, Jay, I know you did what I asked. I'm fine. We're here, having lunch, and that's okay. I know it's strange, but you helped her. You gave her relief. I don't know where she will go from here. She can't stay with me much longer because I need to take control of my life again, but this was the right thing to do." I couldn't find the words to respond. I heard her, and deep down I knew she was right, but it just didn't feel like me. I felt like I had betrayed my wife with someone else, not the other way around. It wasn't right. This wasn't who I thought I was, and honestly, I felt ashamed and guilty. Amy softly said that everything was fine and hoped Chloe had found what she needed, but I suddenly got upset. I hit my hand on the table and said, "Amy, I think you're great, but can you please be quiet for a moment? This isn't about you. You seem to be okay with it. I get that. But this is about me. This is about who I thought I was and the boundaries I believed I had. I feel like I've crossed them, and I'm not very happy about it. So while it might be okay for you, it's not okay for me." Amy looked shocked, and I noticed many emotions on her face, the most troubling being a calculating look. She took a breath and said, "Yes, I'm sorry. I've been focused on Chloe since you've been part of this, and that's not fair. My views are not yours, and I've been ignoring your feelings." This sounded a bit like therapy to me, so I had to ask, "Not there yet? What does that mean?" Is there a certain place to be? She thought for a moment and said simply, "There is where we can do what we did last night, and then you can do what I asked you later. You are there because you could do it. The fact that you are questioning it now shows that you are a good man, just as I believed. It's okay. You can forgive yourself. I pushed you into this and I hold no resentment. Chloe needed it, and you know it. So take it easy on yourself, you're just being a hero again, which is a nice change from most of the guys I've met." Her words were kind and clearly just what I needed to hear, boosting my confidence. Yet I sensed there was more to discuss, and I didn't want to dive into it right then. It's a pity. It could have been a meaningful conversation, and given the events of the following week, it might have prepared me for a significant change in my life that would be out of my hands again. 3 days later, while having dinner, Amy mentioned she needed to go upstate for a PhD graduation. She had been the main researcher for this candidate, and he was having a private dinner at a hotel in Seattle to thank his team since he had just received his doctorate. I asked what the degree was in, and I think she said something bizarre like Klingon and parapsychology. I wasn't really paying much attention. She then mentioned she wanted to stay overnight since it was a 2-hour drive, and she would probably be drinking. Did I mind? I was preoccupied with an app I was working on and waved it off. "Sure, that's fine. Go ahead and enjoy yourself. I'll take Chloe to the movies or something," Amy said. "I'll text you my location if you need anything," she added. 3 days passed. I saw Chloe twice during that time. It was a bit awkward, but a nice kind of awkward where we both tried to behave well while laughing together. She mentioned stopping by that night to go out. I replied, "Sure, I'll drop by around 7. I showed up on time, but what I found was a surprise. I had expected just a movie night, but upon entering, everything changed. Chloe was on the couch, dressed in white attire that looked very elegant. She wore a lace robe and other classy pieces that made her look stunning. Next to her was Wendy, dressed similarly in black. They both looked great. They were sipping champagne, and there was an extra glass on the table in front of them. I paused, taking it all in. Chloe smiled, and Wendy greeted me with, "Hello, Jay, you look good." Caught off guard, I said, "Hello, Wendy, you too. Chloe, Chloe set her drink down. "It's all right, Jay. Amy said it was fine. I asked first because I didn't want to put you in an uncomfortable position." I asked, "What position? What's going on here? I mean, it looks like you two are well." I gestured towards them. Wendy smiled and took a sip of her drink as Chloe explained. "The plan for that night was that you were supposed to be with the 3 of us. You didn't get that chance, and we felt it was unfair." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Really?" "It's true," said Wendy, setting her glass down. "Mark knows I am here. He's actually okay with it, hoping it could help fix things. We thought you might have difficulty handling everything at once. So what do you think?" I stood still for a moment and then said, "I think I need to talk to Amy. There's too much happening lately, and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I appreciate this, but I need a couple of hours to think. I can't jump into this just now." Chloe set her drink down and stood up. She seemed a bit worried, realizing maybe she had pushed too far. "Jay, please, we just wanted to make you happy." I looked at her and said, "I know. I need to be the man I should be. I can't just jump into things. Honestly, I'm getting tired of others making choices for me. It's been happening a lot lately, and I'm not okay with it. I have to talk to Amy because we need to discuss this face to face. This is great, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel right, at least not to me. Things are going too far, and I need to understand what Amy is thinking." I said, "I'll be back. Don't leave." I glanced at Wendy taking in the scene. I considered taking a picture, but that would be crossing a line. I looked back at Chloe and said, "You got that? I'll be back." With that, I left. It was hard to walk away, but I was sure it was the right choice, even if not for the reasons I thought. Seattle was a 2-hour drive for most people. I made it in 1 hour and 25 minutes. I love that Mustang. I called Amy, but she didn't answer. I left messages and tried again while using my phone's map to find the hotel she had texted me about earlier. When I arrived, I jumped out of the car and hurried inside. I realized I didn't know her room number, so I rushed to the front desk and asked, "Miss Halsip?" "May I ask who is asking, sir? I generally need to confirm this," the desk clerk responded. I replied, "I'm part of a celebration for some PhD students, you know how it is." I hoped he recognized the event. Thankfully, he seemed to. He looked me over and asked, "Do you have a costume?" "It's in the car," I said quickly. He paused for a moment, then said, "How much do you charge? I might have other work for you later." I didn't know how to respond, so I said, "Maybe. But right now, can I have her room number? I need to find her before she goes out." "Oh, right," he said, shaking his head. He checked his computer and said, "Room 343 on the 3rd floor. The elevators are that way." I thanked him and headed to the elevators. He probably figured out I wasn't retrieving any costume, but I had more important things to focus on. I quickly reached room 343 and knocked on the door. I heard Amy's voice say, "Just a moment," and then she opened the door. She was wearing something unexpected. It was clearly a special day, and I had missed it. "Jay," she said, clearly surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, not opening the door very wide. "Amy," I began, "did you—" Before I could finish, a male voice came from inside the room. "Is that the drinks we ordered? I'm so thirsty here." The door opened a bit more, and there, behind her, was someone I didn't want to see. Jim stood there, tall and well-built, looking like a model. He wore only a robe, which left little to the imagination. I was frozen in shock. I glanced at him, then back at Amy. She sighed, looking distressed, and said, "I'm really sorry, Jace. I didn't mean for you to find out like this." "Clearly not," I replied, feeling the same coldness in my chest that I felt 7 months ago. My heart sank just like it did then. She noticed my expression, but what she said next hit me even harder. "Did you really think we would last forever, Jace? It's been amazing and I've enjoyed it, but I think we've reached the end of this relationship. It's time to move on. You should go back to Portland, and if you want to talk, we can do that in a few days after you've had some time to think. Maybe find Chloe and lean on her for support." And just like that, she closed the door on me. I sat in my car driving back to Portland. Music played, but I didn't hear it. My mind was a whirlwind of feelings and thoughts. I was focused on the fact that there were 2 beautiful women in Amy's apartment who cared about my happiness, one of whom was my wife. I sped up a little, then slowed down again. Looking back, I shouldn't have been driving, but I was too lost in my thoughts to realize it. As I drove, I replayed the evening and reflected on the last 7 months. I couldn't seem to understand it all. Amy had been wonderful. I never believed we would last forever, but I didn't know what either of us wanted from this relationship. Ending it like this felt harsh. She had helped me through so much, yet here she was, walking away out of nowhere. I needed a moment to breathe. I pulled over and allowed myself to cry. I cried for what I felt and for how I had been treated. I felt betrayed. I started to wonder if there was something about me that made women stray. After a while, I wiped my eyes and got back on the road. I realized I needed to be stronger. Amy had been just right for me. She even helped Chloe cope. She had done such a good job that I could think about moving on without falling apart as I had before. It felt lucky to have met someone who understood me when I needed it most. Then a thought crossed my mind. An outrageous thought crossed my mind, one that seemed impossible, and I was annoyed with myself for even thinking about it. The more I pondered it, the more I examined it, the less I could dismiss it. It explained many things I had wondered about, and honestly, it was so strange that it felt believable. Of course, I had no proof it was real. But as I drove, I came to some conclusions. I needed to explore this wild idea. I had to find a way to either prove or disprove it. I couldn't return to playing with Chloe and Wendy, but I had to talk to them. Surprisingly, I felt focused and not as upset as I had just a moment before. If I was even partially right, there was no point in being upset over what had happened that night. If I was wrong, well, I could always feel sad about it later. When I got back to Amy's apartment after 1 hour and 23 minutes, because I have a habit of timing things, I walked in. The girls were still there, now wearing comfy clothes, sitting on the couch and watching a movie. They both looked at me when I entered, and Chloe stood up slightly, unsure. "You're back," Wendy said, a little too cheerfully. I needed to handle this carefully, as their reactions could tell me a lot. So I tried to keep my expression serious. I said in a calm tone, "Amy and I are not together anymore. I found out in a way that felt very similar to how I learned things while in Montana. I need some time. Honestly, as much as I would love to stay, I can't right now. My mind is all over the place, and I just need to leave." I watched the girls closely. I noticed Wendy's quick glance at Chloe, which was easy to read as if she was saying, "Now's your chance." I also saw Chloe stand up with her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. With real concern, she said, "Oh no, Jay. Please, not again. You don't deserve this." She was right. I didn't. A wave of frustration bubbled up inside me. It seems I am the issue here. Twice in 1 year. You can do the math. Chloe looked unsure of what to do. She reached out, but she couldn't quite reach me from where she was. She hesitated on the couch, clearly torn between wanting to comfort me and feeling unsure about our connection. I turned to Wendy, who was looking back and forth between Chloe and me, like a spectator at a match. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but it was clear she felt out of place in this moment. "Look, I need to leave. Chloe, honestly, if I were you, I'd pack your bags and head back to Spokane now. Amy mentioned she thinks it's probably time for you to go. I don't think staying here is a good idea." Chloe frowned in displeasure. "Oh, I'll be gone. We'll tidy up before we leave, right, Wendy? It will be nice for the person who left to come back to a clean space. I didn't mention that just a few days ago the situation was different for me. Honestly, it felt good to have support at last. Look, I'll keep in touch. Wendy, it was great to see you." I nodded at Wendy and she nodded back. "Come visit us, Jay, please, we miss you." I nodded again and looked at Chloe. She said, "Jay, talk to me, don't be alone, come find me." I nodded to her too and replied, "I'll be back soon, I promise. I just need to sort things out for myself." I gave them a small smile and added, "Don't worry, I won't disappear again. Not this time. I just need some time." I turned, placed the key to Amy's apartment on the kitchen table, and left without looking back. I spent the next 2 weeks working hard both on my job and on a personal project. At first, I wasn't making any progress until I had a great idea, set things in motion, and then waited for results. Within 24 hours, I got some answers, and they weren't good. Within 5 days, I had more information. By day 10, my worst fears were confirmed. I closed my laptop, staring blankly at the coffee shop where I was working, shaking with the weight of everything I had learned. I got another cup of coffee but spilled most of it because my hands were shaking. I apologized to the barista for the mess, not making any friends that day. Sitting down again, I realized I had 2 things to figure out. I needed to understand my feelings about everything, Amy, Chloe, and so on. Then, I had to decide what to do about it. I thought I could resolve it all before lunch. In truth, it took me several days, but I decided I had to face things directly. I made my choice and was ready to act. Now, it was time to gather everyone involved so I could finally find some closure in this confusing chapter of my life. I called Chloe and asked if I could visit her in Spokane. She had returned there, and we had been texting every day. She was worried and kept saying that if I didn't come back to see her, she would come to me and stay for good. I had been keeping my distance, using every excuse I could think of, but now it was time to confront everything. I requested that she make sure Jim, Kathy, Mark, and Wendy would be there too. I sensed hesitation in her voice, but she was hopeful this could lead to some healing. She asked nervously, "You're not going to cause any fights, are you? I don't want any more mess to deal with." I chuckled a little and said, "No, I just really need to talk to them. I haven't talked to Jim or Kathy since that night, and I need to clear the air with Mark and Wendy too. Don't worry, there won't be any shouting." She replied, a bit unsure, "Well, if you feel that way, then yeah, I'm sure they would love to see you. Tomorrow night? Can we do it in 3 days instead? I have one more thing to take care of." "Sure," she said. "I can't wait. Please promise me you'll stay." "We'll see," I answered. "Let's not rush things." I could hear her disappointment, but she understood. "See you soon. I can't wait." I had one more task to finish that night, and I completed it quickly. Then, I just had to wait. 3 days later, I was in Spokane. Not much had changed except the season. I was at the corner bar having one beer, just one, and thinking through everything. I had a lot to say tonight, and I wanted to make sure I covered it all. I knew some facts, had figured out others, and guessed some things I needed to know which was which. I finished my beer and turned to leave, then saw Sam standing behind me. "Hey man, back again. Do you want that beer?" I laughed and said, "Sam, I would love to, but I need to go see Chloe first. Once I'm done, we are definitely having that beer, and I'll even let you buy it." I patted him on the shoulder and walked out. As I drove up to my old house, I noticed Jim's red Ford Explorer parked outside. He was early, but that was expected. I walked up to the front door and rang the doorbell. It felt strange. The door opened, and there was Chloe, smiling at me. She looked great. Nice blouse, well-fitted jeans, her hair styled, and just a bit of makeup. "Come on in. You don't need to ring the doorbell. This is your house, too." In a way, it was I had been helping her financially for the past 2 weeks, and I felt fine about it. I entered the living room and saw Jim and Kathy on the couch with Mark and Wendy at the table, while Chloe sat in a chair. Everyone stood up, and I could sense the shared breath of surprise. Kathy held Jim's hand tightly, and Wendy reached for Mark. No one spoke. They just stared at me. I looked at them, seeing their concern. They wanted me to feel okay with everything, to return to how things used to be. There was a big issue hanging in the air that no one wanted to address. I knew what I needed to say, but now was not the right moment. The gathering wasn't complete yet. "Hey, I think I could use a beer too," I said to Chloe. "Since everyone else had one, why not?" Chloe hurried off to get a drink, and I just stood there. Eventually, Kathy said casually, "You look good, Jay." I smiled back and replied, "You too, Kathy." I wasn't going to make things easy, but I also didn't want to be rude. Chloe returned with the drink, and everyone settled down again. Jim played with his drink and asked, "How's Portland? Does it really rain there more than here?" I laughed and replied, "How would I know? I work indoors. Most of the time, I hardly see a window. Remember how pale I am?" Everyone chuckled nervously. My lack of a tan was well known, and everyone always worried about my shiny head burning the moment the sun came out. This moment helped ease the tension in the room. I wouldn't say everyone relaxed completely, but the feeling of worry and fear lessened significantly. I sat down in another chair and looked at my drink. "Stella, nice choice. Thanks, Chloe." She smiled back. She was starting to notice that I felt confident and had something important to say, and she was beginning to wonder what that was. "Look," I said, "I have a lot to discuss. I need to ask some questions and learn a few things, but that can—" Just then, the doorbell rang. Chloe started to stand up, but I jumped up first. "Let me get that. I'm expecting them," I said. As I walked away, everyone exchanged curious looks. I opened the door, and there was Amy right on time. She was wearing a simple skirt suit, her hair pulled back. She looked surprised to see me at the door, but she quickly composed herself. "Hello, Jay," she said after a moment. "I didn't expect to see you here." I could see her thinking, and I smiled at her. "Well, I'm here. I'm sure you can figure out what that means. Please, come in." I noticed she hesitated, considering if she wanted to go into a stranger's house with me, but she stepped inside anyway. I was relieved because if she had left, I wouldn't have been able to keep her there, and it was important for her to be here. In many ways, this was all about her. "Come on in and meet everyone," I said. "I've talked a lot about them." She entered the living room and took a look around. Mark and Wendy stood up and stared at her. Wendy took a deep breath, and so did Kathy. "Guys, I'd like you to meet Amy Halsip. I'm sure the private investigator you hired told you all about her," I said. Amy nodded at everyone, and then looked at me questioningly. "You know what? I don't really know why I'm introducing you to her," I said, dropping back into my chair and picking up my drink. "You all know each other anyway, right, Dr. Ingram?" To her credit, Amy didn't react strongly. She must have sensed something when she saw me at the door. She avoided my gaze and turned to Chloe instead. "Chloe, could you please make some tea? I could really use a cup." I recognized the delay she was trying to create. "Doctor, sit down, let's talk," I said. Finally, she met my eyes. For once, she seemed unsure of what to say. There was a tense tone in my voice that filled the room. Mark and Wendy exchanged worried glances. Jim and Kathy held tightly to each other, not daring to look around. Chloe busied herself in the kitchen and soon returned with a cup for Amy, handing it to her. "Okay," Amy said. "Enough of this. Please explain yourself." She folded her arms and gave me a fierce look. I studied her for a moment before speaking. "Mark and Jim, I have a few questions. I need you to answer honestly." "Whatever you need, Jay," Mark replied, his voice shaking just a little. "Right," Jim added. "If you know about her," he nodded toward Amy, "then there's no reason for us to lie. You'll get the full story. Agreed?" Everyone else nodded in agreement. At this point, I felt I could trust them. It wouldn't make sense for them to lie, especially if I caught them in a lie. If they were truly sorry, they would share everything I wanted to know. First question. How much did she cost? I gestured toward Amy, who sat still. Her services must be very expensive. Jim took a deep breath and quietly answered, $250,000. A stunned silence filled the room as Amy sipped her tea. Even I was momentarily lost for words. Wow, I said. That's what my wife was worth? I didn't mean to say that, but it slipped out. Looking back, it was harsh, but some old feelings resurfaced. Jim reacted strongly. All four of them seemed taken aback. That's not how it is, Jay. We were trying to fix things. That's what friendship is worth, and then some. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on Amy Dr. Ingram. So, can I call you Jessica? Given our history, I hope that's okay. Amy Jessica looked at me calmly. You won't be aggressive, Jay. I know that. I'm sorry for everything. It was needed. You needed help, and I provided it. The profile didn't cover everything as I would have liked. I simply stared at her. Finally, I asked, Do you have any idea how difficult you are to find, Jessica? There's hardly anything about you online. No one seems to mention your group. It's like you don't exist. Do you have someone clearing your name from discussions? Sure. Here's the rewritten passage in simpler language, eliminating any inappropriate content. I thought you would, to be that careful online. She paused and said, Jay, I really want to know how you found me. My group is great at hiding their tracks. I let out a rough laugh. Oh, I believe it. I saw that Amy Halsip, the one you pretended to be, passed away when she was 18. I think you meant for me to discover that. It seems like the mystery background was meant to draw me in, right? Amy, or Jessica, smiled back at me. Your profile did seem to lead that way. I leaned back. I bet it did, I said, especially if this group was encouraging it, pointing to Mark and the others. So all the secrets are coming out now, huh? Should I go through them for you? You can correct me if I'm wrong? Everyone just stared at me with serious faces. I took another sip of my drink and focused on Chloe, trying to read her expression before I started. So, that day in Montana, you all had been drinking and joking around all day. After what happened the night before, you thought I would be okay with sharing, and you had been getting ready for it all day, right? I looked around, but no one met my gaze. Point made. You, Jim, Kathy, and Mark, you all had planned this because you had done it before, hadn't you? This wasn't your first time, was it? Finally, Wendy looked at me and said, Yes, how did you know? When I went upstairs to get my keys, I saw you and Mark with Kathy. Wendy, you are great, but you wouldn't let Kathy do something like that just because you were having fun. You had done this before. It was clear just by looking at you. Kathy bit her lip, and Jim glanced at her. I had to wonder if Chloe knew about this. Had she been included before? I looked at Chloe, who was steady and unreadable. Honestly, I want to believe she hasn't, because if she had, that would change everything. I think you all talked about it all day and were nudging her toward it, right? Chloe bit her lip too, but kept her gaze steady. Kathy then said, Yes, we have done it before. No, we hadn't included Chloe or you. She knew about it, though. She's smart and caught on weeks ago. We wanted to include you both, but weren't sure how. You're a straight shooter, Jay. We like you, but we didn't know how you would react if we just said it outright. The whole weekend was meant to see how open you and Chloe would be. I nodded. I figured, but I still don't understand why I was sent to chop the tree. If you were trying to cheer me up, why not have me drink slowly during the day? Because we just wanted to enjoy ourselves. We thought you were okay with it from how you reacted the night before. The girls were excited about you based on what Chloe had shared. They thought you were great, Mark said. So I return. I'm tired and irritable. I take a bath, you offer me drinks, and then I just fall asleep in the middle of a game. That must have interrupted your plans, right? There was a brief quiet, then Jim spoke. We had been looking forward to it all day. We had only one more day there, and we made a mistake. The drinks were too much. We tried to wake you, but you didn't stir. We thought we could party, and you'd get all the girls to yourself later to make it up to you. You'd be fine with it. Ah, yes, the second chance reason, I said. Everyone looked away except Wendy, who said, No, it wasn't like that. We wanted to help make your dreams come true. Even Chloe thought so. I said with a strained voice, Wendy, whatever you thought was happening, it felt like a second chance to me. No amount of other girls could change the fact that my wife broke her promises to me based on an idea no one really thought through. It was quiet after that. No one knew how to respond. After a moment, I continued. So you kept playing your game? Two of you got close? Clothes came off, and it just started, with the idiot over here sleeping right in front of you? More silence. More looks away. And then I woke up and saw what I saw. I left in a daze. After I left, you all eventually realized I was gone. Chloe panicked, and you all figured that I must have seen something troubling and left. You didn't know what it was, but it must have been serious for me to just go, right? So the search for me began. Someone took Chloe home to the road and got to a place where she could use her phone. She called urgently, and when she got back, I was gone, and that was bad, yes? Everyone exchanged looks, and Mark finally said, "Pretty much." Jim added, "We looked for you for days. We called the police, but they found no signs that anything was wrong. They just said you left, and that's not against the law. We hired a private investigator, and it took him a couple of days to find you in Portland." "Then you came back," Kathy said, "and you talked to Chloe." I nodded. "Yes, I did. Until then, I imagine you didn't understand what I was feeling or what I had seen. When I came back, I told you everything what I saw, how it affected me, and how I was dealing with it." "Right?" I asked Chloe. She just nodded, and a single tear fell from her eye. "When Chloe told us what you'd said, we were heartbroken," Wendy said. "Not as much as I was," I replied, unable to hold back. "Well, obviously," Wendy shot back, giving me a disapproving look. "We realized right then what we had done. We messed up. Not you, but us. We were too pushy, too eager, drunk, and foolish. We didn't know what else to do. You were gone. Chloe was scared and alone. We couldn't blame you. What happened was awful, and we never thought it through." There was a heavy silence. "And then we come to Dr. Ingram," I said, looking at Amy. I shook my head. "This is exactly the sort of silly idea you all would come up with without me to stop you." "We couldn't just leave it, Jay," Mark said. "We hurt your marriage. We damaged a relationship that we all care about. You were the best among us, and we ruined it. We had to do something. So you hired the best. Ingram and Associates, Covert Recovery. That's what it says on your cards, right, Dr. Ingram? Your specialty is helping people in ways they don't realize they need help. I've heard you often work with soldiers coming back from tough missions," I said. "Yes," Amy said. "They hired me to help you get back on track and possibly reconnect with your wife." "Doctor, was it your idea to follow this plan, or was it theirs?" I asked, pointing at the others. "If you want the truth, it was a mix of their ideas and mine. Once they reached out to me and explained everything, we talked and they gave me a profile of you. My team spent 3 days reviewing it with them. I have to say I was intrigued. Honestly, and I'm not just saying this to flatter you, Jace, there aren't many people like you. Everyone has their own problems, but you treat people well. You have standards and hold to them. You genuinely seem to be everything they said you were. I had to see for myself if you were as they described," Amy said, her tone growing more passionate. "And was I?" I asked, my tone serious. "Did I measure up?" She looked at me, then away, and quietly answered, "Yes." Then she turned back and continued, "Since we're being honest, please know it wasn't just a job for me. At first, you were struggling, but I began to care about you. It made my work challenging at times. What I wanted and what I needed to do were often very different, and that was difficult. You are a good person, and towards the end, it became tough." I stared at her. She looked away, then back, and then away again. For the first time, she seemed more like a woman than a psychology expert. "So, let me understand this. The plan was to bring Dr. Ingram here to help me, then put Chloe in a tricky spot and hope I would come to her aid, right? You really didn't think I'd come back, did you, Jessica? That's why you changed your appearance, and why it took you 3 days to talk to me. You thought I wouldn't return, didn't you?" Jessica shook her head, saying simply, "No. Based on everything happening, the plan suggested you would stay. I was in D.C. when you came back." "Except I didn't." She nodded. "Your own good nature worked against the plan. We aren't used to people who actually follow through on their words. We thought there was a chance you might do what you thought was right, but no one in the office really believed you would. It's just how things go, I'm afraid," she said, sounding sorry. I turned to face Mark and Jim. "And speaking of that, what were you thinking by sending that guy to my ex-wife's house? Who thought that was a smart idea? I raised my voice, breaking my promise to Chloe. I felt my muscles tense and had to make a conscious effort to calm down. I realized I was going to crush the beer bottle in my hand, so I set it down. Mark and Jim exchanged nervous looks, and Jim fidgeted. Wendy and Kathy avoided eye contact too. Finally, Mark looked at me, and I could see everything in his eyes. He looked sorry, scared, and sad, and didn't know how to respond. But he tried. I had to give him that. That was another mistake. The idea was to put someone troublesome in there to push you to come back and fix things. You'd had time to think, and now you needed to return, to see that Chloe needed you. You would deal with him and realize this is where you belong, and it would all work out. Jay, Jim added, look, we didn't know he was that bad. We didn't know about his past. We did take precautions. We reached out to the bikers, remember them? If you hadn't come after the second email, they were going to handle it. He would have been gone either way. But I did come back, I replied. Mark nodded. When I met you at the bar, I meant every word. I was worried. You needed to face this. Well, all your words were true, right, Mark? What you left out? Well, he sighed. I don't have any excuse. None of us do. Wendy suddenly spoke up. Jay, for what it's worth, what you did showed exactly who you are. Once again, you proved you're a good person. When you left and called Mark, we went right over and Chloe told us everything. She was in a really bad place. For the first time, she really understood that you were lost. Until then, she had been holding on to hope. I glanced at Chloe, who was crying and trembling quietly. I was trying hard not to ask her anything or even look at her because I didn't want to see something that would hurt me too much. But I couldn't help it. So, what's the plan? I asked. Jim nodded. We got in touch with Dr. Ingram. A friend of mine at the State Department mentioned her group and she agreed to come here. We talked about what to do next. The thing is, we thought this plan would either succeed or fail. It didn't turn out like we expected. But because of what happened, we couldn't just stop. We felt terrible because we messed it up, and you seemed to handle everything perfectly. We knew we had to fix this. We all agreed we needed to do whatever it took. We started this, made it worse, and needed to make it right again. I chuckled quietly. Good thing I'm not the brightest, huh? You've really outdone yourself, Jessica. I never saw it coming. Suddenly a thought struck me. That was what all that was about before I left, right? Saying, give me a reason to come back was just you having your fun before I went away, wasn't it? Jessica looked a bit embarrassed and managed a small smile. That's why we acted the way we did. You revealed your true feelings then. It didn't matter anymore. I feel foolish. Jessica pressed her lips together and said, Jay, I'm very skilled at this. Don't blame yourself. This is the result of years of training. In some ways, I hate my job. Yet in others, I help people. It's not typical, but it works. The only reason you are here now is because I helped you get here. And let's be honest, it wasn't the worst thing to happen, was it? For either of us. She turned to Chloe and added, I know this might sound strange, but you're lucky, Chloe. Jace cares about the people he is with. I don't know how much experience you have, but I would hold on to him. Men like this are rare. Well, great, Dr. Ingram, I said. You're right. Maybe one day I'll forgive you, but not today. I ended that more harshly than I meant to, but I was upset, and I had my reasons. So what's next? Do you have a new plan? I asked, turning back to Mark and Jim. We decided to keep trying. We needed to keep going. Here's the revised version of the text you provided. So we can begin with Dr. Ingram returning and moving forward, and then Chloe made her own decision and came to you. Remember, Jace, said Jessica. All of this was necessary. It was real and right. Chloe needed your forgiveness, and you needed to forgive her. You also needed to remember why she was your wife. Having her come to me meant you had to face it. There was no choice. We had to go with it. I nodded. Oh, I see it, Doctor. I completely understand. It's a clever plan, I must admit. So that continued, and it went well, and then we come to Halloween, I said. I have to say, I'm quite confused about that. We went to the club, what happened happened, and then you sent me home to be with Chloe. I don't get that at all. Jessica sighed. It was a chance to achieve several goals at once. It was a chance to show you that being part of a group wasn't as bad as you thought to help separate that feeling of being betrayed. It was also about allowing you to connect with Chloe, and it was suggested to me that you should enjoy yourself. You had been through too much, and it was time to restore some balance. I nodded, understanding. Ah, I see it now. Wow. It seems everything we did was carefully planned, wasn't it? Jessica briefly looked away and said softly, No, not really. So, the events at the hotel? Those were planned too, I gather? You were playing a risky game there, testing my heart again? She bit her lip and said, That was a calculated risk. We needed to do something that would lead you back to Chloe. Everything was arranged for you to feel it was the natural choice. This time, though, we were prepared for your protective side. We didn't know if you'd come to the hotel, but we were ready if you did. And you did. Yes, I particularly like the calculated risk part there, given that the risk was completely on my side and not yours. Thank you for that. If it had gone wrong, I'm sure you would have been very upset. By the way, I just wondered, did you actually get a chance to enjoy yourself? It seemed like it was all set up to make me think you did, but I never saw any proof, I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. No, said Dr. Ingram with a small, tight smile. That was Todd, my executive assistant. The only person there that night who would have been with him is you, Jay. I laughed bitterly and said, Yeah, makes me wonder if I should try that. I bet they don't disappoint you like women seem to. So that pretty much brings us up to date, doesn't it? I said. Thanks to you, Mark, for sending Wendy over. I do hope you get to see that outfit. It's pretty nice. I winked at Wendy, and she actually blushed. With everything going on and all the tricks being revealed, she actually blushed. I guess you're wondering how I figured it out? I looked around. I could see the curiosity in everyone's eyes, but no one spoke. Well, to be honest, I knew from the very beginning that you were not the real Dr. Ingram. I had no idea who you really were, but didn't dig too deep. It was easy to find out that your identity wasn't true with a simple online search. Adding to that, you clearly had some therapist training. So I realized that not everything was as it seemed. Still, I went along with it. I have to admit, I did, even though I knew something was off. I still needed it. I thought maybe you were in hiding or something like that, but honestly, I just didn't want to investigate further. So great job, everyone applause, you were all right. But the real surprise hit me while driving back after a breakup in Seattle. As I drove home, I couldn't help but think how Dr. Ingram was just what I needed, and now two lovely ladies were waiting for me at home. Wendy blushed again. How lucky could one guy be? It felt so perfect. Then I started to wonder, what if it really was meant to be? I thought back to how Amy showed up, how she wouldn't let me go, and how she liked the same things I did. I thought she didn't know much about those things, and at first I believed I impressed her. But what if she learned about them just to connect with me? Then I remembered those emails I received, telling me to come back home. I discovered the server they used and didn't look further. But upon checking again, I traced them back to your email server, Jim. I know you aren't great with technology, so I was curious about how that happened. I talked to my friend, the one Mark mentioned. It turns out he set it up for you without knowing it was aimed at me, and he's not happy with you, Mark, just a heads up. Don't go turning my friends against me, it never ends well. So we have emails from your team to me, and the idea that Amy might have been sent to me. How do I find out if that's true? Let me tell you, it was tough to find Dr. Ingram. There was no website, no online trace at all. Want to know how I found you? Well, I didn't. The group did. Remember that app I was developing where you ask the world questions? Well, guess who helped come up with some questions? You guessed it, this guy. I nodded at myself with both thumbs up. So I added a question. If I needed help for some behavior changes that needed to be kept completely secret, where would I go? And out of nowhere, two people pointed to you. I didn't expect anything would come of it, but there it was. I had to do some research to find a picture of Dr. Ingram. By the way, you can find your name on a conference website from 2008, Doctor. You might want to look into that. After that, I found out a lot about you. Your group is quite exclusive. I paused to take a breath. The room was silent, everyone was listening closely. I sent you an email from Mark's company after I found out your email address. Oh, and Mark, I added a couple of new filters on your server. The security job my friend did on your IT system is good, but once you know the password, it's easy to get in. He is pretty upset with you, by the way. The email I sent was about a billing question, and your team at Ingram's replied, which linked you to them. The last detail to get you here was another fake email asking you to come today to discuss a case, urging you not to call because Jay might hear the call. Honestly, once I figured things out, it wasn't as tough as you might think. There was silence again, and I took another sip of my drink. That brings me to my final 2 points. First, what do I do now that I know? Everyone stared at me, and no one said a word. How do I make it clear to all of you that you not only messed up at the start, but also made it worse with lies and tricks, putting my ex-wife at risk? My voice was calm but firm. I was very angry and trying hard to keep it together. How do I show you that as friends, you have done everything possible to make me want to make your lives as difficult as you've made mine? What should I do about that? I could respond with anger like a hurt partner might. Mark, his voice shaking, said, J.I., everything you said is true, but it wasn't meant the way you think. Yes, some things were sneaky, but we had to act. We couldn't just sit back and do nothing with the way things were. You weren't exactly answering my calls. If any of us had just shown up, it wouldn't have ended well. I nodded. He made a valid point. Kathy jumped in and said, Jay, everything we did was out of care for you. We never wanted to hurt you more than we already had. We couldn't leave things as they were. We had a responsibility. Chloe was heartbroken, and so were you. I leaned in and spoke to Mark, but I meant it for everyone, trying to stay calm. I get it, I really do. That's why we're having this talk now instead of being in a worse situation. But you need to understand that while I see that much of what you did was for a good reason, nearly everything that's happened to me in the past 4 months was built on false beliefs. I felt misled and controlled, and it's important for you to know how that feels. My friends did this. They created a story for me to believe and then took it away, all supposedly to help me. And remember, this whole mess started because of a mistake you made. Do you understand that? Am I making sense? Everyone had their heads down now. What do you want us to do, Jay? Wendy asked softly. But I wasn't done, so I ignored her. I also want you to know something else. Even after everything I saw, I knew Chloe. I knew she would feel terrible once she saw how I felt. I knew it would hurt her deeply. I was certain she would reach out to me and need support from you all. I understood her and what her reactions would be. It was something I questioned since I never would have pictured her in this kind of situation. And it hurts, but I know she cared for me. I couldn't look at Chloe as I spoke. I trusted that I knew her well. Even though I was hurt, I believed she was the person I thought she was inside. But now, you've changed some of that for me. I can't trust anyone in my life right now because I feel everyone has tried to manipulate me. In your attempts to help, you've taken away my ability to trust the person I thought I knew best, along with the hurt you caused that night. Do you understand what you've done? Can you see the extent of the damage? Wendy and Kathy began to cry as I spoke. Jim stared at his hands and Mark shifted in his seat, searching for words. I raised my hand as Jessica began to speak. Amy or Jessica, whatever name you want, I said it before and I'll say it again. Please be quiet. I don't want to hear anything from you right now. Maybe later, but right now, just let me finish. I looked at them, and it was time for my final question, the one I really needed the answer to. I turned to Chloe, who had stopped crying and was staring at me, fear and worry in her eyes. There's one thing I need to know. How much did Chloe know? How much was she involved in this? There was silence, and in that moment I understood everything. It hurt deeply. So she knew. I turned to face them. If I thought my heart was breaking before, it was shattered now. I didn't think I could handle this, but I needed the truth. She knew some things, Mark said. She had no idea about the trouble with the person living with us. We only told her when you went back to Portland. I forced a smile. I bet she was pleased to hear that. But then I dropped the smile and continued. Because I sure am not. Mark, we need to talk about this. He looked down, defeated. Yes, we know. We made many mistakes. We were just trying to fix things. You understand that? I turned back to Chloe and saw tears welling up again. I could see her softly saying, I'm so sorry, and please, repeatedly. She wanted to confront us when we revealed what we had done. She wanted to come to Portland and tell you right away. She actually came to do just that, but we got her to see Dr. Ingram first. She convinced her it wasn't the best choice, that if she really wanted you back, this was the way to do it with the least pain, Jim said in a distant tone. I looked directly at Chloe and said, I honestly thought you were incredibly strong coming back to yourself those weeks. I didn't understand why you didn't just confront her. I gestured to Jessica. Now I get it. You knew it was temporary. You knew I was being guided to return to you, that she wasn't a real threat. I'm sorry, I really am. She said her way would bring you back to me. Don't you see? I had to have you back, no matter what. I couldn't go on without you, Chloe cried. I didn't know what else to do. She told me to stay calm, that it would work out in the end. I just followed her lead. I didn't know what was happening. I had no idea what they intended. She suggested inviting Wendy that night, saying it would be okay and that if everything went well, you'd be mine forever. I had no clue what she was planning, I swear. I sat quietly, processing her words. After a moment, I said, Chloe, you can't rebuild trust by hiding the truth. What can I do, Jay? Please tell me. I'll do anything to have you back. I can't take this anymore, Chloe said, her voice filled with desperation. I found myself at a loss for words. I had known this moment would come since I set up this meeting. Part of me wanted to clarify everything to make a decision. I had been torn about whether I could forgive Chloe, whether she truly understood. And now, here we were, and I had no idea what to say. I was still hurting from how I had been treated and the betrayals I'd faced, but I still wanted to love her. I had no one else to turn to. Can I say something? Jessica asked gently. I nodded in reply. You are a good man. Everyone knows that. The question you need to answer is how much do you love your wife? I stared at her, feeling blank. Would you hurt someone for her? I nodded. Would you hurt someone badly for her? I nodded again. Would you give your life for her? I paused and then said quietly, If I had to, but I'd rather not. It wasn't much of a question. Then let me tell you this, based on what I've learned over the years. What is the problem? She made a mistake. It was a big one. It hurt. But you move past it. You need to just be happy. You don't have to forgive everything or forget everything. You just need to be together. You will find a way to cope. She clearly isn't going to repeat her mistake and she wants to make you happy. But stop punishing her. Right now, you're punishing yourself the most. It seems like you think you caused this somehow. Jessica shook her head in frustration and said, Stop looking at me and look at her. I turned to Chloe, saw the hope in her eyes. It was so desperate and in need, and I said, Oh, Chloe. With that, she jumped into my arms and held on tight. I kissed her deeply. She kissed me back just as firmly. There was a sound of someone crying behind us, but I didn't move until I was ready. When I pulled back, still looking at Chloe's bright smile, I said, None of you are off the hook. We are moving to Portland, and that is final. I don't want to see you all much for now. You have a lot of trust to rebuild, and I'm not sure it's possible. If I sense any tricks from you, you won't like my reaction. Do we understand each other? I got a chorus of yes, and one playful, get a room from behind me, which made me smile. Okay, all of you please leave. I have things to do, I said without turning around or letting go of Chloe. As they left, I called out, Wendy, you did keep that outfit, right? Which made her blush again. It has been 2 years since that day. We moved to Portland, just like I promised. Chloe is still my wife. She found a new job there. There's always a need for good nurses, and we have made new friends. We still visit Spokane occasionally. We were just back for a wedding and saw Jim, Kathy, Mark, and Wendy at the reception. They looked the same, and it was clear they wanted things to be like before. They tried really hard, but it wasn't the same. At least now we can be polite, which is a step forward. Jim keeps asking me if I want to start a business with him. He dreams of a big company with employees, but even though I don't completely trust him, I'm happy with what I'm doing now. I understand why they acted the way they did. They tried to fix something they messed up, but I haven't truly forgiven them yet. I always knew they had a tendency to make mistakes, but I didn't realize how it would feel to be on the receiving end. Sometimes I think about getting back at them. But for what? They didn't mean any harm. They just assumed I was okay with everything because they were not thinking straight and misunderstood my feelings. I wonder what I would have done if I hadn't been busy with the tree. Would I have gone along with them if I had been in their state? I think the answer is probably yes. Given that, I can see why they acted the way they did. Their actions were definitely not right, but I can understand where they were coming from. No one was trying to take anything from me. It was just how things turned out. I am still hurt and angry, but life is too short for that. I don't easily forgive, and I definitely won't forget. Yet it's clear they want to be friends again, and they are really trying to make things right. They spent a lot of money trying to fix things, which makes it hard to stay upset. So we invited them to a barbecue in a couple of weeks, which will be interesting. I still remember the promise they made, and I tease Chloe about it now and then. Chloe and I are closer than ever. She has a brighter spark in her eyes, and last year we went to Hawaii for our anniversary. I can still picture her from that trip, and sometimes I see a bit of sadness in her eyes when I react in certain ways. I've told her that's something she has to manage herself. None of us come through tough times without some scars. Dr. Ingram returned to her clinic in Washington, D.C., but she visited a couple of months ago while in town. She asked if I would let her use my story for a book she is writing, keeping my identity private. She thinks I have what she calls a chivalry complex, and wants to explore it. I don't mind, and told her she could go ahead as long as no one knows it's me. In our relationship, Chloe and I have opened up more to each other. We've had a few experiences with other couples, and I was really nervous about it, and she was even more anxious. We wanted to see if we could manage it, and while it was enjoyable, we agreed it was not something we wanted to do regularly. That being said, I have taken Chloe to a certain club a few times now, and Wonton is becoming a good friend, quite a special friend. We socialize with her, and her real name is Sophia. I can't wait for Halloween this year. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.